Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff. Eric, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm great, man. I've been out whipping shitties in my pickup truck, having a great time here in Wyoming. It's going to be like 50 degrees here today. It was beautiful yesterday. It's going to be even nicer today. I was out walking around in my sweatshirt yesterday, talking to the big man here, Sea-Dog, out with my dog. I got a suntan. It's crazy.
Yeah, not the case here. It's still ice apocalypse here around my house in Huntsville, but I managed to venture out for the first time today with my dad in like a week. It's a big old 10 degrees here, man, and surrounding both of our houses, just a solid sheet of ice. We're ill prepared here in Alabama, but I had a lot of downtime this week, and I learned the phrase whipping shitties. And my wife was familiar with this because I guess it was a Minnesotan phrase I was not familiar with, and you educated me before we clicked record. You too were familiar with whipping shitties. How old were you the first time you whipped a shitty?
When I was a kid, it was called spinning donuts. By the time I was in my early teens, whipping shitty entered into my zeitgeist. Probably about 15, 16. Once I got my permit, I just, started experimenting and having fun. By the time I was 17, 18, I was semi-pro.
Yeah, here in Alabama, man, my whole life, it's just been called donuts. The idea that whipping shitties is a thing, I'm learning, but you live to enlighten here on 83 Weeks. We did a fair amount of that last week, Eric. I saw a lot of really high praise from last week's episode. What was the feedback you got? A lot of people were calling it a low-key Eric Fires Back, which we used to have as a special over on adfreeshows.com, where we would play clips from old shoot interviews and things like that and give you a chance to respond. And as you said, shred them like a head of cabbage. So be sure to check the archives at adfreeshows.com. But last week was a little different, man. We recapped your Twitter feud, if you want to call it that, with Tony Khan, and then let you respond to some clips from FTR where they were promoting a live event at Collision. I saw really strong feedback online though. What did you see as response from last week?
A lot of feedback as well. And I noticed a lot of the, it was split, it wasn't, I don't know that it was 50-50. I didn't keep track of it, but there were certainly people that took exception to what I had to say in my response to FTR. But I noticed in looking at a lot of those accounts, they were, I don't judge anything by how many followers people have and shit like that. But there was a pattern of a lot of the really vocal critics to what some of the things I had to say. They had 34 followers, and nobody else in the wrestling universe, followed them, or did they follow? It's just, I don't know who these people are. I think they're just desperate, lonely people for the most part. Now, some of them had some very interesting and defensible arguments, but the vast majority of them just, it concerned me for the state of humanity and the wrestling audience as a whole.
What do you mean?
There's some wacky fuckers out there. Just, their passions are so misplaced. It concerns me that get that upset about wrestling chatter on social media. Like, don't take it that seriously, folks. It's just fun. Just having fun here. But there were some real serious meltdowns.
Yeah, I find that weird. It is very weird to me. Like, you're a guy who was in the industry, who worked at it at a high level. And I saw a lot of people sort of come into your defense. Kevin Nash over on his fabulous podcast with Sean Oliver, Click This, was asked about your interaction and exchange with Tony Khan. And he went on and on and on defending you about how you were the only guy who beat Vince McMahon. And we've hammered that point here on last week's show. But one thing he did say that I thought was interesting, because of course, I think, famously Tony Khan posted that graphic that referred to you as a has-been. And I like that Kevin said, if nothing else, Eric is a has, because he has beaten Vince McMahon. He has had an unbelievable amount of success in professional wrestling and, unique qualifications there. So a lot of support from the big man over on Click This.
He's a smart man. But look, I'm sure there are even some in the wrestling industry that are currently active in it. I'm not going to drop names because I don't know this for a fact, but I'm relatively certain there are a few very, very powerful names formerly in the business that probably don't understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, or very uncomfortable or disappointed that I'm doing it. But I made a decision a couple of weeks ago. I've kind of danced around the fact, or not fully embraced the reality, that what we do here is important to me. Now, outside of my family and people that are close to me, maybe they wouldn't understand that. But we get on here every week. We talk about an industry that's important in American pop culture. It's an important part of the television and media industry as a whole. There's millions and millions and millions of people around the world that are interested in the industry and what goes on behind the scenes. And I think this show, I don't want to suggest that it provides a public service, but it at least gives a different perspective. And not to put myself over, I've done it enough and have you well. But my perspective is unique in the sense that I actually played at a very high level and have been able to observe so much in that process over the past 30 years that it seems odd to me that on a show like this, when I'm being asked questions, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, I don't comment on wrestling, especially on any topic in wrestling, especially on this show, unless I'm asked a question. So if there are people out there who are interested in what my perspective is, and I give it honestly, and I try to break down the reasons why I feel the way I feel based on my experience. And if that still melts, the minds of AEW fans out there, well, I can't do anything. But I'm going to fully embrace it. I'm not going to hold back because I know this is going to sound crazy to some people, but I actually have tried really hard.
Yes.
To kind of lay off the whole situation. I've told you that a couple of times. But I'm asking a question. What am I supposed to say? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have an opinion about AEW or Tony Khan because, I don't want him to melt down or his fan base to melt down. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to refuse to answer a question, a general business question, or a question about my perspective, simply because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to try not to be personal about it. I try to keep my comments in the context of business, strategy, tactics, or lack thereof. But I don't. You'll never hear me accuse people of participating in things that are untoward or spreading rumors or creating rumors. That's just not my gig. I don't do that. There's a lot of things I could be talking about that I absolutely refuse to discuss because it falls into that Dave Meltzer rumor and innuendo category. And I just refuse to do that. But you asked me a question about business or my perception, perspective on things that are going on now, not you, but collective out there in the audience. I'm going to respond. If you don't like it, what can I say? Don't listen. Don't follow me on social media. And that's another funny thing. A lot of those people that were like burying me follow me.
Yeah.
I can't believe you suck. No one wants to hear what you have to say. I can't believe anybody listens to your show. Oh, really? I just go to look and, they're a follower. Thanks for the follow, dude.
Man, it's crazy, but we did get a ton of feedback. I thought right at the top of the show, we should respond to some of it or give you a chance to see what some of the people were saying from our Facebook page, which is over easy for you to find at 83 weeks. Noel Comics would write, I like that Eric supposedly hates TK because Tony said he's a better owner / booker than Ted Turner, which he is. Turner wasn't a booker, LOL. But Eric goes to work for Vince McMahon, who did the billionaire Ted skits. Tony, like Eric in WCW, gets hate because people on the losing end of the industry say he didn't pay his dues. Also, Eric needs to stop acting like Tony never earned anything. Dude helps run 2 sports teams and a wrestling company. Eric used Ted Turner's money and made crappy Scott Baio reality shows. But I guess producing Scott Baio is 45 and pregnant made E an expert in literary theory. So, yeah, a little bit of hot take there from Noel Comics. What do you think of Noel's comment?
Well, first of all, D Silva, could you put that post back up there again? Because there's a lot of ground to cover there.
Yeah.
And I want to try to get it right. The first thing that I noticed about that comment was that at least it was from a grammatical point of view,
right?
At least it was coherent. And I always appreciate that because sometimes I get, posts like this and it's like, you have to kind of run it through artificial intelligence to determine what it actually said. But let's take it kind of one step at a time. I like that Eric supposedly hates TK. Right off the bat, you lose me on that one. I don't hate anybody, and I especially don't hate Tony. I like Tony. I just don't have any respect for him from a business perspective. And there's a big difference there. I know that may be a little over your head there, Noel. It will be hard for you to embrace the concept that someone can like someone on a purely social, personal level, because I don't know Tony Khan. But if I saw him on the street, I'd wave. If I saw him in a restaurant, I'd stop by and shake hands and say hello. But I don't agree or respect some of the things that he's done from a business perspective. And those are the things that I will, when asked, prompted, or otherwise motivated, react to. So there's no hate here, folks. I've said it a million times, but people want to continue harping on that because that's kind of like the dirt sheet, internet wrestling narrative. Okay, enough of that one. Tony said he's a better owner booker than Ted Turner, which he is. Well, I don't know about that. Turner wasn't a booker. That's true. Okay, so we've got one kind of obviously true statement there. Not much to comment on. But then I go to work. Eric goes to work for Vince McMahon, who did the Billionaire Ted skits. This is the part where there's a lot of this kind of thinking. In fact, Dax, when we reacted last week, Eric, you did the same thing. No, knucklehead. I was actually head to head. We were at war. We were in a battle. Get that graphic back up. We were at war. We were competing and in war and in real competition, not cosplay competition from the sidelines, but in real competition. You're going to have situations where people are lobbing for grenades back and forth. I lobbed them at Vince. He lobbed them at Ted. That's what made the Monday Night Wars so much freaking fun. But the component of that battle that is lacking today is real competition. So no, I don't give quarter to Tony Khan and the likes of his fan base who argue that because I'm doing something that Tony is doing something that they think, because they don't think through it, something that I did made me a hypocrite. Dude, he's whining like a baby from the sidelines. That's not competing. It's an entirely different scenario. And if you're not capable of digesting that intellectually, there's nothing I can say or do that's going to change your life. All right. Tony, like Eric in WCW, gets hate because people on the losing end of the industry say he didn't pay his dues. I don't know that. There were a lot of people who went, who's that guy? Why is he getting this job? Who's he ever beat? He doesn't even know how to lace boots. Okay, I agree with that. That is true. That's human nature. It's jealousy, it's envy, whatever. It's insecurity. But those same people were oftentimes people that were on top of the industry, not people on the losing end of it. So the premise of the statement is flawed from the get-go. All right. Eric also needs to stop acting like Tony never earned anything. Dude helps run 2 sports teams and a wrestling company. I'm not going to really get into that one too much, but I've done a little research on some of the things that have been going on in the UK with regard to Tony's teams. And I think it might be a leap to suggest that Tony is hands-on. I don't know. I'll let it go at that. But there's material out there if you want to read about some of the things that people have said about Tony and his association with, football/soccer over in the UK. It's out there. I don't need it. Interviews with people that work for him and things like that. All right. Eric used Ted Turner's money and made crappy Scott Baio reality shows. Okay, we got 3 seasons of Scott Baio, number one, and crappy reality shows don't last 3 seasons. So just from a purely, a capitalistic point of view, again, another flawed statement and a reflection of, ignorance, meaning lack of information and or knowledge. Because in reality, I produced those shows along with Jason Hervey long after I left Ted Turner, and I had nothing to do with Turner Broadcasting. That was our money. That was our business. It wasn't funded by anybody else. We put our own money into the pot, and we went about making all kinds of great television. Great might be a stretch.
Profitable television.
That was commercially very viable,
Yes.
Generated more money. I made more money producing independent television than I ever made in professional wrestling throughout my entire career. So it's another stupid statement that's a reflection on the person who wrote it. But I guess producing Scott Baio is pregnant, made easy, an expert in literary theory. I've never claimed to be an expert in literary theory. But here's what the uninformed neophytes, wannabes that have never really been in the industry, but yet like to talk about it or analyze it like they have. One of the things that I learned in producing reality television, non-scripted television, was from the executives that I worked with on the networks that were buying the show, who had more experience than I had or Jason had at that point in time in creating non-scripted formats. And when you learn the theory and the formulas that work, consistently work, you have a unique opportunity, as I had, and as you have as listeners, to get a glimpse into the world of creating and producing television that can be competitive. I learned a lot about formatting and about conflict and about drama and the balance of it and how to format it and how to create arcs. That's one of the things that I bitch about so often with regard to the quote unquote storylines that I see sometimes, is that there's no structure to it. There's no discipline to it. There's no anything to it. It's just, let me put it this way. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but that kratom is awesome.
Kratomed up, Daddy.
Kratom up, man. I'm on a K ride. When you go to a movie or you watch a television show, I'll ask you, Conrad, but I'm asking the audience.
Yeah.
Do you go to enjoy 90 minutes or so and study acting ability of the actors on screen?
No.
The kind of techniques that they might use?
No.
How they use their body language while they're narrating dialogue?
No.
Do you go to break down the lighting?
No.
What do you go for? You go for the story.
I go for an escape. Yeah. I want to go on a ride. I want to
get sucked into somebody else's journey.
Yes, correct.
Because that journey happens to be more interesting or exciting or exhilarating than you're in.
Yes.
That's why people watch shit. That's why people read books. And learning how to create a real story matters. If you're going to a movie or you're going to or you're locked into a television series, it's story first, everything else second. In the minds of a lot of wrestling fans and the Dave Meltzerites out there, it's like, oh, no, we got to put the quality of the acting first and then maybe a story. It's like the story is an excuse for the action in the ring, as opposed to the action in the ring being a result of the story. That's the best way I can say it. Difference between Tony Khan's way of booking and the dirt sheet internet wrestling observer style of booking that Tony employs, and my perspective, is that action in the ring should manifest as a result of the story, not vice versa. And that's it. I mean, that's the best way I can sum it up. So yeah, my experience producing non-scripted television and studying and working with some of the best producers ever, guys like Tom Beers, really, people don't really know Tom well enough, but he's probably produced more top non-scripted programming than anybody in the history of it. Don't know that as a fact, but I'm pretty sure I might be right on that. I've known Tom for 20 years, 25 years or more, and have had the good fortune of working with him and developing projects with him as a partner. And guess what? I'm a fucking sponge in that environment. I'm learning from someone who is way better at that stuff than I am. But what happens is it allows me to have a different perspective on a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing right now. But that perspective was nurtured long after I got out of professional wrestling, but it still applies. So, I do my best, folks. I do my best. But hey, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to pull punches. I'm not going to be intentionally mean and demeaning to people. But I am going to have fun, and I am going to be honest. So strap in or go do some other shit. I don't care.
Tom Beers, by the way, if you're wondering, hey, what did that guy ever do? Well, how about shows like Deadliest Catch, Storage Wars, Ice Road Truckers, on and on and on. A television.
Oh, how about West Coast Choppers? That's what I mean. A little bit about Tom Beers, and thank you for bringing that up, Conrad. Tom Beers, I first met Tom Beers when he was an executive producer, I believe, at Turner Broadcasting, back when Turner Broadcasting had National Geographic. Tom produced a ton of National Geographic type content years before he really got into the non-scripted, character-driven stuff, right? That's where I first met Tom. We stayed friends from that point forward. So it's probably going back 30 years. When Tom left Turner, started his own production company, he did so much stuff. But the one that really put him on the map in that genre was West Coast Choppers and Jesse James. Now, a lot of the youngins here listening to the show, there aren't many, but there's probably a few, may not remember West Coast Choppers and what an absolute television phenomenon it became, because it was huge.
It was. And
this cat, Jesse James, he was just a regular guy working on motorcycles, and he made you couldn't go into Walmart and not see racks of West Coast Choppers t-shirts.
Yes.
They probably made more money licensing and merchandising over a 4 or 5 year period than WWE was making during that same time period. It was ridiculous. And Tom built that model. Tom took this guy making motorcycles, created a format, learned how to bring out the best in his character, surrounded him with other people to augment his character, because he can't all be about one guy, and took us on a journey into a world that most people didn't know existed, or at least were interested in one. Did a phenomenal job. Deadliest Catch, as you put it, that show's still running. He created that probably 12 years ago.
Tons of spinoffs from that too.
He's done so much. And for anybody to suggest that anyone, not just me, that has an opportunity to work directly with someone like that and learn how to develop non-scripted, learn how to structure story, because the same rules that apply non-scripted, character-driven television, reality shows, many of them still apply to wrestling. You have to modify it. But anyway, how are you, Tom? You know what Tom's doing right now? I don't think Tom has been in the same place for more than 30 days at a time. I live vicariously through Tom. He's traveling around the world. He's going to the most obscure places that I've never heard of, beautiful places, and just he's living his life, man. He had a heart attack about 15 years ago. I think he made up his mind that he was just live his life, and he is living his life. He's a great guy too. Loves wrestling. I think he was originally, the first time John Cena ever saw a red light was on a reality show that Tom Beers was working on. He never really produced it. but he was developing it. And I think he shot some stuff with John Cena when John Cena was like greener than goose shit 2 days into a wrestling school.
I've actually seen that episode. I remember that. But I do want to talk a little bit about pulling back the curtain on the finances of producing reality television, because we've never really talked about that before. But before we talk about how you made money, I want to talk about how we can save everyone money. I'm talking about Rocket Money. You and I are big believers in this. I think it's well known that I thought I had a pretty good handle on my finances. I mean, that's what I help people do, is get out of debt and all that jazz. But man, I had a blind spot. Rocket Money pointed it out to me. Here's what I mean. If I asked you how many subscriptions that you have right now in your household, would you be able to list them all and tell me how much money you're paying? If you would have asked me this question before Rocket Money, I would have said yes. But man, I would have been so wrong. I can't believe how many I had and all the money that I was wasting. Rocket Money to the rescue, man. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions. They monitor your spending and they help you lower your bills all in one place. You can see all of your subscriptions in one place. And if you see something you don't want or you don't use anymore, you can cancel it with a tap. It's that simple. You never have to get on the phone with customer service. There's no emailing back and forth. How about this? Rocket Money will even try to get you a refund for the last couple of months of wasted money, and then try to negotiate to lower your bills for you by up to 20%. All you got to do is take a picture of your bill and let Rocket Money take care of the rest. Rocket Money has over 5 million users, and they've saved their members an average of $720 a year. We're talking more than $500 million in canceled subscriptions. So stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/83weeks. That's rocketmoney.com/83weeks. rocketmoney.com/83weeks. So Eric, we talked a little bit about, the inside jab, the tongue in cheek. Oh, Scott Baiow was pregnant and 45 or whatever the shit. But the reality is, you've told me off air, because I like to learn about other businesses. Hey, how does that business work? And as you explained it to me, when you sell a show, a studio or a production company or whoever, the decision maker on the other side who's looking to get this content agrees to like a per episode price. And then it's up to you guys to go actually make it happen. And when you told me a number, I said, so like roughly what would that look like? I nearly choked on my water. I remember we were in Florida talking and I had no idea. Can you share, like, as an example, what a per episode price order may have been? Like when you were creating reality TV and someone places an order and says, hey, we want a season of this, whatever that looks like. How does that break down to a per episode investment?
Well, first of all, it's changed a lot.
Sure.
So whatever I share with you today probably isn't nearly applicable.
Right.
But, my daughter is a vice president of development for a very significant television production company that produces non-scripted programming. So I still, have access to a little bit of information. It just comes up in conversation. But going back, one of the first shows that Jason and I ever sold was to a guy by the name of Dean Valentine. Dean Valentine was the network exec at what was UPN. By the way, when I sold this show to Dean Valentine, Jason and I always say I, but it's we. When we sold the show to Dean Valentine, UPN was carrying SmackDown. All right. So they were very active in that 18 to 49-year-old audience. They wanted it. We sold that show. And let me best describe that show without spending all morning doing it. Imagine really badass monster trucks meets professional wrestling meets motocross.
Okay.
But it was an arena-based show that would travel. All right. Sold that show for $750,000 an hour. Yep. And sold, I think it was 8 episodes. And what was interesting is we sold it on a bar napkin. That's right. Didn't shoot a frame of sizzle tape, no demo tapes, no casting tapes. We did put some horsepower into a kind of a physical model of what that arena would look like. That was it. So that was then. Let me give you another example in that category. Hulk Hogan Championship Wrestling on CMT.
Yeah.
That was another one, $750,000 an episode.
My goodness.
Some of the stuff we did on Discovery, we did a couple different series on Discovery. Those were probably in the $500,000 an hour category. But we also produced some that were $250,000, $350,000. Now those are on smaller networks that just didn't have the budget, or they didn't include a lot of top-heavy talent. The theme of the show is going to be top-heavy talent, so I guess this is a great subject to talk about. But for example, with Hulk Hogan, first of all, you had a pretty big cast. You had Hulk, and he wasn't cheap, right? And then you had, now these were not like A-list celebrities, but they were still making money. And we had quite a big cast. So you got a lot of talent on the above line, as they say. Right? Below the line, and below the line means all of the things that from catering to cables to cameras to whatever it is you need to actually produce a show and get it to the network, the editing process, all that stuff. That's considered below the line. The below the line number on that show was probably about $400,000 an hour. If you broke that budget out and looked at, and top line also includes executive producers, which Jason and I were. That's where our money comes from. But that show probably just the physical cost of production was probably about $350,000, $400,000 an hour. But we did some that were $250,000, for smaller networks.
Sure.
And here's how it worked for us. This is one of the reasons why Jason and I really decided to get out of the television business really about 2014, because those budgets started coming down dramatically. While the networks expected more quality, it's no different. You don't want to spend as much money, but you want to get the same quality. Actually, in the case of television at that point, they wanted better quality for less money because they were getting squeezed.
Right.
Because of what was going on with streaming, internet advertising, probably more than streaming at that point. Internet advertising was eating away into the traditional television advertising budget. So all of the budgets started coming down. But typically, Jason and I would make, as executive producer, we would make 10% of the overall budget. So on Hulk Hogan's Championship Wrestling, for example, we made $75,000 an episode as executive producers. But since we were producing and we were physically producing the show, all of that below line, all those below line numbers, that $350,000 to $400,000 that I just referred to, we also made 10% of that. So we were making money above line, we were making money below line. I say 10%, that was an average of 10%. Sometimes it was more, it was a little less, but an average of about 10% of that below line budget. So now do the math. 35% of $750,000 is whatever it is times 8 or 6 or 10 or whatever the episode number is. That's how we were making our money. But when those budgets started getting crushed and the quality of the production in terms of demand from the networks started increasing, it was like, no, not doing this. The margins are too tight. And I effectively, both Jason and I, it wasn't like we wanted to, or we got into an argument or a fight about anything. It was just like, fuck, we can make more money doing other stuff. We don't know what the other stuff is yet. We'll figure it out. But this stuff is no longer working.
I just thought it was interesting that what fellow on Facebook thought was like a clown you moment. Meanwhile, he went to make shows with Scott Baio. It's like, you clearly don't think a lot of Scott Baio for you to say that. Now let's finish the sentence, or let's read it from my perspective. Can you believe Eric Bischoff sold the show with freaking Scott Baio for hundreds of thousands of dollars an episode? That dude's a hell of a salesman. Like that's my takeaway. It's not like a negative thing. It's like this dude can sell Scott Baio for hundreds of thousands of dollars years after he's been on TV. That's a compliment, boys and girls. It's not a negative. Nick had a comment that was in support on social media. It wasn't all negative. Loved it. Eric Bischoff and the 83 Weeks podcast is a mandatory weekly listen for me. Take no shit, Eric. You've earned the right in the business of professional wrestling to tell people what and how you feel. Keep doing what you do. David had more support. He said FTR made personal comments, which Eric responded really well to. As for Tony Khan, looks like Eric's having a blast answering TK, which proves the point. He should stay far away from X. I don't know.
I don't know that that's true.
Yeah, same.
Tony got a lot of support.
Yes, he did.
You know, I'm not sure if I was Tony that I'd, invest my resources or time.
Nash said the same thing on Click This. He said, if I was a billionaire, I wouldn't give a fuck. And he went on to say, I'm not a billionaire and I don't give a fuck. So I just thought that was fascinating. Kale says FTR are the hugest marks for themselves and don't understand wrestling's real. Come on, Kale. That's not polite. I disagree with that. What are we doing? The tribalism here is out of whack here, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, if you're good, and I agree with you, Conrad. If someone's going to make a comment like that, give me an example.
Right.
What makes you feel the way you feel? Help us understand that comment. Otherwise, you're just slinging mud. That takes absolutely no talent.
It's funny because there's so much of this, and I'm going to get off track a little bit here, but Dave Silva will keep up with us. You and I saw and really thought a lot of the promo that Hook did on the street prior to last week's title shot against Samoa Joe. And you broke it down on Strictly Business. I'll give you a chance to talk about what you liked here, but I knew just from the way it was shot and presented, hey, Giancarlo, who is one of the secret sauce guys of all of wrestling as far as video presentation, got together with Hook, who already at a young age understands how to present himself different than. I mean, the Hook presentation, from the lighting to the theme song to the trunks he wears, like, I know he's still green. I know he's still learning stuff. I know he's still young, but he's figured out presentation. And you were really complimentary of that promo. And so when people are quick to say, oh, Eric hates everything AEW, that's not the case. That's not the case at all, because not only did you like the promo, you quote tweeted it and told everybody how much you liked it, right?
Well, not only did I tell them how much I liked it, and by the way, I saw that vignette posted on my social media early in the morning. I'd been up for a couple hours, but it was like probably before 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And I immediately put it over. And then I explained why I put it over.
Yes.
Right. So unlike the previous post where the guy's just slinging mud and doesn't tell us why he feels the way he feels, I explained in detail, and I don't know if Mr. Silva has that and he could pull it up again, but I broke it down as to why I liked it as much as I liked it. And I think, and I'm going off memory here, but I think the tweet was, my post was, there for the grace of God go I, in quotes.
Yeah.
Meaning, and I explained why I referenced that, because what Hook did, in my opinion, created an aspirational character, meaning Hook didn't go out there and say, oh, Joe, I'm going to kick your ass. You may be bigger than me. Blah, 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 blah. He didn't denigrate his opponent. He went into that promo with the mindset. This is how I felt. I don't know what he was really thinking. I wasn't there. But this is the feeling, and that's what we're doing these things for. We're trying to create emotion, folks. That's entertainment.
Yes.
Knuckleheads. So what that did is, Hook went out there basically knowing he's going to get his ass kicked. He didn't care. He had enough confidence in himself. He was coming to the ring. He's going to face these insurmountable odds because he believes in himself. That's a quality. And I broke that down. I did it better on my tweet, I think. But
well, here's what you wrote. There for the grace of God I go. Hook in his promo is facing seemingly insurmountable odds, but he knows it. He doesn't care. He believes in himself. Something most want to think about themselves. It makes his character aspirational. I dig it.
There you go. Now, that was my honest feeling at that point. The show hadn't even aired yet. And by the way, I did watch the show, or large portions of it. But That's all I saw, but I was so impressed with what John Carlos did. Now, I didn't even know it was John Carlos when I saw it. I found that out afterward. But I was so impressed with it because if you want to make a baby face, make an aspirational character.
Yeah.
If you want to create a character that's relatable to the audience, give that character qualities and attributes that people like to believe about themselves or wish they had. That's a baby face. That's the magic.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed with that. And my fear, and I didn't even post it because I posted that. I broke it down. Here's why I like it. There for the grace of God, go I, aspirational character. I boom, hit post. And I thought, oh man, I hope this match is consistent with the character that I just saw.
Yes.
Because if he comes out there and he starts flying around and doing jungle gym shit and, whatever, the more prevalent formula in today's wrestling environment, I'm going to be very disappointed.
He didn't do that.
And I wasn't disappointed.
No.
The story in the match was a reflection of the attitude and the perspective of the character. I loved it. I thought it was great. And I think that's exactly as Tony is looking down the barrel of a renewal, right? That's the kind of thing. And I said this on social media, not to be a critic, not to be a hater, to point out that Tony should lean into that, whatever it took to get to that vignette and that match. Isolate the people involved. Make them raise their hands in a meeting. Who is involved in the Hook promo? Everybody involved. From Hook down, raise your hand. Okay, you guys go over here. All right, who was involved in laying out that match? Hook, Joe, but who else is there an agent involved? Did anybody else have input into that match? Raise your hand. You two people? All right, you go over there with these guys. These guys are now my head writers.
Right.
Get John Carlo in there because anybody that understands the storytelling of a 2-minute promo or whatever that was also understands the story and storytelling technique that needs to be applied to the television show. Get John Carlo over there with those guys and listen to them. Maybe not give them the whole show because they might not have experience, nor might they even want it. But listen to people like that. Listen to those people. Allow yourself to be influenced, much like I was by Tom Beers, because they're better at it than you are, Tony. Tom Beers was better at it than I was.
Right.
Learn from those people. Surround yourself with those people. Give them money. Buy them pizza. Do whatever the fuck you have to do to keep those people on your team and influencing your show. Because replicating that formula, expanding on that formula, so that half the show is dream matches and the other half is actually story-driven in a real sense of the word, not a Dave Meltzer sense of the word story, but in a real disciplined, structured storytelling way, let those people have at least half your show. And that might be the right balance.
So who's the pressure on tomorrow? I mean, is there really anything that I have to lose? And also, I'm not big enough to compete with Samoa Joe. Hey, but I am getting some calories right now, so who knows? Then again, who the am I anyway? 24 hours, Joe. I'm coming for that world title.
What I really enjoyed about the promo was the inside baseball reference that if you knew, you knew. We weren't hitting you over the head with it. But of course, as everyone recalls from the week prior, your interaction with Tony Khan led to criticism about Tony Khan calling out the backlash, if you will, or the upheaval about Hook getting a title shot when Jinder had. And then Jinder got involved and said, "What TF is a Hook?" Or who TF is the Hook? That's what it is. Who TF is the Hook? Well, he managed to work it in there. Who the fuck am I anyway? In the promo. Nice little callback. It felt very ECW. And what I mean with that, Eric, is a lot of times my favorite part of the old ECW TV program were produced like this, outside on a street. It felt very guerrilla style, not very scripted, very gritty. It had that vibe to me. I just think Hook's presentation has been really cool because it's been different. And I love that video, and I love that you put it over. And I find it interesting that there's so much negative criticism about you being vocal about the parts of AEW that you're not a fan of, but there are parts that you do like, and it's right there for everyone to see. They just choose not to, but you actually chose to tune into the match. And I'm curious what you thought, because Samoa Joe at this point is at the top of his game. He's been a world champ in TNA and been a world champ in Ring of Honor. And now he's a world champ here for AEW. And I felt like it was a fantastic performance by both guys. There's an old cliche in wrestling I've heard a bunch. It's not who goes over, it's who gets over. I felt like we checked all the boxes. What'd you think?
I think Jinder Mahal knows who the fuck Hook is now.
Yes, he does. I think he knew all along. He was having fun. Come on.
Yeah, but that aside, then Hook rubbed his nose in it. How's that?
Yeah, there you go.
I like that. Hook hasn't gotten a lot of exposure.
No.
I don't even know how long he's been around. A couple years?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of talent in AEW that we haven't seen yet or seen much of. So it's easy to just kind of dismiss them. I think that promo, first of all, I think Hook should take Giancarlo out to dinner.
I think they're friends in real life, if I had to guess.
Every Friday night for the rest of his life, or at least the rest of his career, because that promo got him over. Got him over with me, for sure. Not that matters, but I think generally people went, wow, I dig that, right? Got him over. And then Joe, I think Joe did a phenomenal job.
Yes.
Getting Hook over. Now, you've got some, I can't believe he kicked out. They let him kick out of this. Okay, now you're going into, the Meltzer rabbit hole. Did the match create emotion?
Yes.
Fuck yeah. Did the crowd enjoy that match because it created emotion? Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Was the match well received on television for the very same reasons? Yeah. So again, are you going to the movie to critique the actor's performance, or are you going to the movie to enjoy the story? I enjoy the story, and I think Joe is such a pro. First of all, he's cool as shit. Have you ever spent any time around Joe?
Just a little bit, not very much.
Dude is so understated cool. Like when you look at Joe, he's a scary fuck to look at. I mean, you see him in person, he's big on television. Stand next to him. Well, not for you, but for me, I'm 5'10", 200 pounds.
Yeah. He's a big
Holy
boy.
shit, he's big. Yeah. I'm an average sized person.
Yeah.
He's fucking huge. And when he's not smiling, like he's got a little grin on his face if you're watching with us on YouTube. And if you're not, you're missing the boat. Or if you're not on ad-free shows, watching this live, you're missing the freaking boat, folks. God, I love this carnivore diet. The carnivore diet is awesome too. But Joe is intimidating as fuck. What's cool about Joe is in real life, it's just as chill. You'd think he was like a professional surfer. And he's just got this relaxed, chill vibe to him. Now, you know he could kill you, but damn, he's a cool guy. And I think that I see it reflected in some of his social media stuff. Joe's cool. And I would love nothing more than to see Joe be able to bring us his best work. Let's talk about that. What's best work? I'm not talking about flying around the freaking ring. Let's talk about AJ Styles as an example of best work. Is AJ Styles the athlete physically that he was 10 or 15 years ago? Probably not. Nobody is. Looks better. But in terms of being able to move and fly and do crazy shit, probably not, because that stuff, it's death by 1,000 cuts. It wears you down. But I think AJ Styles is in a position to do his best work ever because he understands character, understands story. He's learned the nuance of bringing the audience into your character or into his character or into his story, which in my opinion makes him a better performer than he was 20 years ago, without respect to any of the physicality. Joe has that same opportunity. I think Joe is better now than he's ever been as a character and as a well-rounded performer. So I'd love nothing better to see Joe go on a long, fast, fun ride.
And I'm pulling for Hook. We should mention he had his first match in December of 2021. So he is just a couple years into the game at this point. He's had a whopping 48 matches. And I think everybody is familiar with Hook now, and I'm pulling for him, man. There's a lot of great talent over in AEW, but not everybody is thrilled that we're talking about AEW. Some more feedback from our Facebook page. Here's a comment from Michael Watkins II. He says, I'm a huge fan of the show, but I'm tired of how much focus is put on AEW, good or bad. Sorry to hear that, Michael. We're trying to draw some similarities and some comparisons between the things Eric has learned in business and making them relevant with what we're doing today, but we're still going to hit you with some nostalgia too. Let's take a look
I also want to say, I don't disagree. Sometimes I get a little nervous that we're spending too much time talking about one thing or another, not just AEW, but here's what I hope the audience understands is that I want this show to be around for a long time. And I want it to serve a good, aside from entertaining our audience, I want it to provide perspective that may or may not become valuable for someone. And I enjoy doing it, right? But we have to mix it up.
Yes.
We have to change our format from time to time. It doesn't mean every episode we're going to be talking about this type of thing.
Right.
We've got to kind of mix it up a little bit. So if you're disappointed in the show because we're talking about one subject too much, whether it's AEW or anything else, be patient because we're trying to, appeal to as many people as we can, but also provide some granularity and detail and specificity when we get into the weeds about certain topics. And if AEW is controversial, well, it is what it is. If something is going on in WWE that becomes newsworthy and controversial, here it comes. We'll do that too. But right now, go through social media. Yeah. Topic du jour when it comes to what's going to happen next is AEW.
Let's look at a little more feedback from the YouTube communities page. Matt Gibson says, guys, facts are facts. When Eric ran WCW, they beat WWE, the big dog. AEW will never see that. Thank you, Eric. Another comment from Ryan Tanner says, regarding the Dax stuff, Dax likes TK, obviously. And the difference between Bischoff and the other podcasters, quote unquote, is that even though they criticize AEW constantly, they have, up till now anyway, been rooting for the company and for Tony Khan. They just expect things to be run differently regarding the command structure and wish TK would hire a proper booker. They've said repeatedly they think he's a good guy. Bischoff just said he's grateful not to be working for a guy like Tony Khan, and Dax probably takes that hard. I think most people in the wrestling space, I'm not speaking for other podcasters, but I know that there are a lot of conversations that happen about what should or shouldn't be happening in AEW. In the end, it is Tony Khan's company. It's his money. It's his investment. He'll do with it what he pleases. But the narrative that you're doing anything other than pulling for their success is just misplaced, I think, Eric.
People are sensitive and they don't think. The critical thinking is it's history in a lot of respects, particularly in social media. And if you really listen to what I have to say, and listen, I'm not encouraging people to spend more time listening to me. I sometimes get sick of hearing the sound of my own voice, but my criticisms, my critiques, my explanations for my reactions to things, good and bad, are there for everybody to see. It's not emotion. There's no hate. There's no jealousy, no resentment. There is a lack of respect and an honest opinion. Yeah. Now, sometimes my opinion gets to be colorful, but it's just who I am. It's not coming from a place of wishing anybody would fail. Why would I wish he fails? I got no dog in the hunt, as they say. The exact opposite is true. If anybody that knows me knows if there's anything that I'll react to emotionally, it's seeing someone blow opportunities. Because opportunities, as I've said a million times on this show, are so hard to come by. Real opportunities. And to not maximize those opportunities or to blow them, it hurts. It just hurts. It's almost physically painful when I see it happening.
Well, something that doesn't hurt is our friends at Manscaped. Cheers to the new year from our friends at Manscaped, because your resolutions shouldn't be the only things that are well kept. 2024 is the time for new heights, new opportunities, and a new look for your Times Square balls. Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra is every man's cheat code to look good, feel good, and turn the page on confidence this year. Whether you're looking to maintain or trim or go for that clean shaven look, this trimmer has you covered. Trusted by over 10 million men worldwide, now is your time to get a grip on your grooming with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use the code 83weeks for 20% off plus free shipping. Happy New Year or Happy New Balls. We're talking about the real MVP here of 2024, Manscaped's 5th generation lawnmower. It's not just a trimmer, it's your grooming sidekick. It's got not one, but 2 skin-safe blade heads. You got a standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. It's like having a personal stylist at your fingertips, or, well, wherever you need it. And did we mention this dude's waterproof? Because a trim in the shower is the only way to start the day. And for men who want the full grooming experience, look no further than Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0. Inside this grooming kit, you'll get the trusted lawnmower, the ear and nose hair trimmer from Manscaped, and all of their essential aftercare products, with some of our favorites like the Crop Soother. That's ball aftershave lotion. You need that. Crop Preserver. That's anti-chafing ball deodorant. This has worked so well at Silva's house he can sleep in the same bed with his wife again. It's deodorant for your balls. I bet you didn't think you needed that. Silva did. You do too. And as a gesture for the new year, they even throw you in 2 free gifts, the Boxers 2.0 and the Shed 2.0 toiletry bag, because they know good and well you'll be rocking your boxers from high school if somebody doesn't gift you those. Let's face it, resolutions might come and go, but a well-groomed you, well, that's here to stay, thanks to Manscaped. So why not get 20% off and free shipping with our code 83weeks at manscaped.com? Because nothing says Happy New Year like a deal that leaves your balls and your budget feeling refreshed. Embrace a new you, and definitely embrace a new trimmer, courtesy of Manscaped. So Eric, we got some other feedback I want to run through here. Over on our YouTube communities page, which is easy to find, look for 83 weeks on youtube.com. Sal says, Eric and Conrad, let the facts speak for themselves. Last year, Dax was praising your podcast, and now all of a sudden, he takes a shot at you in a very low level. And why? Just because Eric is pointing out the obvious about AEW and Tony Khan. Jay says, that was a great response. People like FTR who want to credit Eric for his contributions to wrestling need to get a clue, because he's the only one who legitimately went head to head with WWE. I'm not against other companies being out there for people to work at, but it's proven Tony Khan doesn't know what he's doing. Okay. Well, we're taking personal shots. I don't think we need to beat up on everybody else for us to just say, hey, we like Eric's opinion and we support Eric. Chintz McMahon says, Bischoff already went through the experience of having bosses who wouldn't listen with Dixie and Bob Carter during his consultant phase at TNA. There's no reason to go through that kind of frustration all over again with Tony Khan.
I think that was probably in response to someone thinking that the only reason I'm critical is because I'm unhappy that I didn't get a job in AEW. I am so grateful that I was never given that opportunity, because early on, I may have been interested because I was so excited about what I saw early on. Very late 2019, early 2020. It wasn't until afterwards that I began to go, ooh, because here's what would have happened. If I would have taken the job as head of catering, which I would have been overly qualified for, but properly incentivized, I may have taken that job just to be around the business and whatever. Keep my foot in the wrestling door some way. But even if I was the head of catering, I would be being blamed for a lot of the shit that you're seeing now.
Yeah,
there he is again. Look at first of all, going back to TNA, I didn't run TNA,
No.
and the guy who posted that recognized that. I was a consultant. I didn't want to run TNA. I didn't want to be in the office. I explicitly in my contract made it clear that I didn't want anything to have to do with operational responsibilities within TNA. But yet, I drove them into, first of all, they didn't go bankrupt, but apparently people think they did.
They're still going.
And it's my fault. It's my fault that they went into bankruptcy, which they didn't do, because I was there. So no, when I say I thank God I'm not in AEW, I mean, I thank God, His Son, Lord Jesus Christ, that I am not affiliated in any way with that company. Because all of the negative things, or many of them that are going on right now, that'd be my bad. And I don't need it. I don't want it. I don't need the money that bad. I'm good right where I'm at.
Another comment from at DT, or I'll get it right, at D2K Prime. This is from our YouTube. I like this. Do not correct a fool or he will hate you. Correct a wise man and he will appreciate you. Apparently that's a quote from Bruce Lee. I like that, man. Do not correct a fool or he will hate you.
Here's a little bit of Bruce Lee / Eric Bischoff trivia. Never thought you'd hear that coming out of me, did you?
No.
Do you know that, I can't remember the year, but Ishii Kanjo, who was the head of K1, asked me to come over to Tokyo to do play-by-play for a K1 event, which I did. Great time doing it. You know who my color commentator was? Bruce Lee's daughter. How about that?
I didn't know that.
Yep, it's a fact. And she was a lovely person. Really, really nice woman. Didn't get to, socialize with her after the show or anything, but, worked with her pre-production and had a blast working with her, and probably spent a little bit of time chatting with her after the show and all that, but never really got to know her. But that was kind of a cool thing for me. I grew up watching Kato and the Green Hornet. It was awesome.
Man, you brought up Kato. I should bring this up. It came out since you and I recorded most recently that Okada has put in notice. He will not be renewing his contract with New Japan. And this follows a long trend of a lot of people leaving New Japan. Like a decade ago, it was the Good Brothers and Shinsuke Nakamura and Finn Balor and AJ Styles. And then there was the wave for AEW that followed. So Hangman and Cody and Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. And now more recently, Will Ospreay's out, Jay White's out, now Okada's out. And a lot of people are wondering what's next. I guess it's been broken down or tried to be explained to me that Tony Khan, for one, would not require Okada to relocate to the United States like WWE would. And he does have an existing relationship there. He's been to AEW shows. He's wrestled on AEW shows. He's apparently friendly with the Young Bucks and has been for many years since their time together in TNA. And I guess he's become pretty good friends with Bryan Danielson after they've had a couple of matches together. But a lot of people feel like it's been communicated somehow, some way that Okada, who I first met backstage at SummerSlam in New York, like 9 years ago, it's been said that he really wants to compete at a WrestleMania during his career. So Okada seems to be the next big sort of free agent signing. What do you think? Where would you expect Okada to show up? WWE or AEW?
I have no idea. Unless you really understand someone's motivation, true motivation, not social media motivation, because that can also be kind of positioning and negotiating, right?
Sure.
I don't know. Look, if the cat doesn't want to leave Japan and wants to commute, it's going to make weekly television really difficult. If he's not going to be able to make weekly television, then he's not going to be involved in any kind of a well-structured story arc. So I don't know that it makes sense for someone who doesn't want to leave Japan, but wants to work in the United States for a company that produces weekly television.
We don't know that he won't move.
No, I say that, but I apologize. Yeah. If it is true,
that
he prefers to stay in Japan, then I think AEW is his only option.
That's right.
If he wants to wrestle in WrestleMania and doesn't want to leave Japan, I say I have about as much chance of headlining WrestleMania. You're not going to be able to get to that level if you're not a part of the story, the programming, not being built and elevated. You're not going to come into WWE based on your success in New Japan Pro Wrestling and what they've seen of you and be thrust into a position like that. It's a commitment. It's a long-term commitment. So based on what I've heard, because I know nothing, probably going to end up in AEW, because jumping into the grind in WWE, if you don't really want to move to the United States, imagine it. We'll see, though. I don't know. I don't know the guy. I was talking to a close friend of mine yesterday who is tangentially acquainted, and whatever decision anybody makes about where they're going or what they're doing, I would want to look at the long-term stability of the company I'm considering going to as part of my decision-making process, and making sure that if I'm going into a situation that is questionable, which, look, this is not a criticism, folks, it's a reality. AEW is in the renewal process, or well, let's call it, I don't know if they're in the process or not. They're in that renewal season.
Yes, there you go.
Their relationship. If I'm a top talent and I'm looking at two different opportunities, one of the things on my list of things to consider would be the long-term viability of the company. And with the question mark hanging over AEW and Turner right now, in terms of renewal, or I should say WBD, Warner Brothers Discovery, I would have a conversation with, my management or somebody that I trusted to really give an honest opinion of that, because it's a factor. Should be.
I want to do a little bit more feedback from last week's show, and then we'll move on. We got lots of people who were in big support, guys like Carver City 96, who says, what about the fans who criticize AEW? Do they all want jobs too? Jester said, Eric Bischoff, one of the truly underrated promo guys in the history of the business. Eric has a unique and creative way of telling someone they're a piece of shit, making them feel like that. Blood Eagle says,
true.
They need to listen to Eric because he did the right things in wrestling and he did the wrong things in wrestling. He's trying to warn them not to do the things he did. And that is a positive, that people are making a lot of money. Some people don't deserve or need to make a lot of money, and they don't need to take up space in the wrestling world. Here's a comment that was critical about something I said. Bakuras, screwing that up, over on YouTube, says the problem, Conrad, is that we're seeing the benefits now, but if it's mismanaged, it may be a net negative to the long-term health of the wrestling business, as usually when the business contracts, it contracts across the board, meaning less jobs for everyone in every company, less wrestlers, less pay, less everything. So AEW somehow screwing the pooch affects more than their own company. Well, I hear you, but I'm saying, I guess my point has always been, Tony Khan created these opportunities for other people to have jobs in wrestling out of his own pocket. He wasn't doing it with profits from the wrestling industry. So he's added jobs to his own personal. I mean, it's his money. So every dollar he gives away, I don't see how that's lost on people. I don't think it can be debated that AEW is a net positive for the wrestling business. Deception Hunter says the existence of AEW can only be looked at as a positive through the lens of providing people with jobs and very good pay, and that's where it ends. However, Conrad is 100% deluding himself for thinking that AEW being on TV somehow makes it WWE's competitor. It doesn't. It also doesn't make the existence of AEW a net positive when Tony Khan thinks there are no problems with the way he runs it. TNA is arguably a much better product, and I can't watch it on TV. Well, I think you can watch it on TV. You just don't have the right provider. But I think TNA is a net positive on wrestling, but I think that same thing is true about MLW, about GCW, about New Japan, about AAA, about AEW. They're all competing for talent, which raises the pay scale for the talent. That's a good thing for the industry. Am I wrong in saying that, Eric?
You know what though? I'm going to disagree with you, Conrad.
Okay.
I think, and it's semantics to a degree. But I think Tony Khan providing jobs, great money and great salaries and great opportunities, not just for the wrestling talent, but for people like Giancarlo and people that we both know who are behind the scenes in the industry. They're working in production in other areas of AEW. Those people all have jobs, and it's Tony Khan's initiative certainly benefits those individuals, but it doesn't affect the business. The business is elevated and grows and benefits from a higher tide. Higher tide means more viewers, more advertisers willing to jump on board, more sponsors willing to get involved, more cities willing to spend money to bring wrestling in, more mainstream media covering what was once a genre that most mainstream media would have been embarrassed to talk about. Even during my career, that was the case. And when a company, whether it's AEW, TNA, WWE, or whomever, does things to elevate the energy and the interest in a real way, that's what benefits the business. Let's talk for a second about what doesn't benefit the business. What doesn't benefit the business is presenting things on television that are likely going to turn advertisers away from professional wrestling, or to augment the pre-existing perception that wrestling is lowbrow entertainment and it's nothing but blood and gore and violence and all of this, the stigma. Unfortunately for me, while Tony Khan has been providing great income and great opportunities for people, some of whom are friends of ours.
Yes.
And I'm happy for them individually. It doesn't necessarily mean he's contributing to the health of the business. I posit that he's actually hurting the business with some of the things he's done so far. The chaos backstage, the drama with Punk. Oh, I was afraid for my life. No, AEW is the safest place on the planet. It's kind of like Disney World. No, that stuff is bad. That feeds into the negative perception and stereotypes and stigma that already exists. The whole pizza cutter, blood, the violence, the excessive reliance upon blood as a dramatic storytelling device is the kind of thing that turns off advertisers or studio heads or other people that some other Tony Khan down the road may have $1 billion and want to start a wrestling company. But we've seen that. We've seen, unfortunately, from AEW, how that works. So I think people need to be careful about distinguishing benefits of the individuals from benefits of the business.
Let's do a few more here, and then we'll put a button on the feedback. I got some stuff I want to ask you about in the foreseeable future, because we've got some really big stuff coming down the pike that I want us to talk about. But one of the things we talked about last week was maybe a little fantasy booking. Dale Magnus took umbrage with something we said. No, not The Rock, aka the biggest star on the planet. Let's go with Cody. That's truly some delusional Mark BS. I would expect that from AEW, but not WWE. I don't understand how our statements were sort of misconstrued. Tickets are sold out or almost sold out for both nights of WrestleMania. They're not offering it on pay-per-view. It's on Peacock. Would you imagine The Rock would wrestle at WrestleMania for free, Eric?
No.
So I'm just saying, by that line of thinking, he's going to be a line item expense, probably the largest one at WrestleMania. And where do you get a return on that if you have him wrestle at WrestleMania, Eric? I would argue, I don't see how you'd have to say, you know what, we're going to turn our biggest show of the year. We're not going to make money on it. We're going to try to break even. What? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I can't wrap my head around it. It seems like to me, if you're getting paid to bring a live event, a premium live event to another continent, and they're going to cut you a deal, and maybe there's some tax incentives, and maybe there's, you don't have to pay for the building, and maybe they're kicking in some trans, and maybe they're just paying you to come, or whatever those terms of those deals that Nick Khan is shaking loose of, who I think it's well documented is pretty good friends with The Rock. It seems like that is a more prudent way to approach the business, as opposed to saying, let's put him on this show where we don't need him and we can't get any more value out of. I don't follow it at all.
Well, it's because you think in 3 dimensions. Think about the business perspective, not just what you want to see emotionally on television.
Right.
Right. So when you get past, what's the coolest thing on TV? Because Rock at WrestleMania, great. Sounds exciting as hell. But when you break it down and start thinking it from your perspective, looking at that picture in a 3-dimensional way as opposed to a 1-dimensional way, it's where do you get the largest return on investment? What's best long-term for the company? Let's just argue for a second. Rock's the biggest star in the world. He should be headlining WrestleMania. Okay, there's some, I guess, truth to that in one respect. But what does that do for Cody? What does that do for Roman? What does that do for WWE storytelling going forward after WrestleMania? Is Rock on a roster? If he is, great. But if he's not, he's an attraction. And he should be, in my opinion, he should be used as an attraction and leveraged to open up new markets or create new opportunities or enhance a tactic or strategy. That's how you get the biggest return on investment for the biggest star in the world, not approaching it from a 1-dimensional attack.
Yeah, I just think you got to look at, hey, what's the effect on business here? And I think WrestleMania is going to be a high watermark for WWE with or without The Rock. Like, it is going to do gangbuster business with or without. But meanwhile, you can give so much value to one of these other shows. I don't think there's a way for us to bet on it, but I'm thankful that there is a way for us to bet on these playoffs. I'm having so much fun with PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the most fun I've had winning, up to 25 times my money this football season. And now I can even play during basketball season too. Here's how it works with PrizePicks. You select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and then you place your entry. Like this coming weekend, Lamar Jackson, man, I cannot wait to see what the Ravens are going to be doing. I know my buddy John up at Jimmy's, he's got Shaquille O'Neal coming in for their big tailgate. I would love to throw some money down on Lamar Jackson. You can bet on things like how many rushing yards will they have? Will they have more than or less than this number? Will they have more or less than this number of passing touchdowns? That's how it works. You simply take a player and then a stat line. Like LeBron James. Is he going to hit a certain number of 3 points? Is he going to have, or maybe Travis Kelce, is he going to have a certain number of receptions? You can combine all these different sports. So it's not just football, but you can do specials league, which allows you to do football and basketball, the 2 different projections from 2 different sports. It's so much fun. Even famous rappers like Meek Mill and famous comedians like Andrew Schultz, they're all playing here with PrizePicks. And you can see what they're doing over on the community plays tab. I, for one, am putting my money on the Ravens QB, Lamar Jackson. I might throw down on Christian McCaffrey because I feel like he's going to show out next week. How about this? I want to mention PrizePicks even has a reboot policy. I've never even heard of this with anybody else. But the deal here is your entries stay in play even if one of your guys gets injured. So for football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second half, well, the player is rebooted. As far as I know, PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an insurance policy like this for injuries. I think you're going to have a lot of fun. It's so simple to play PrizePicks. You make your picks and you get submitted in less than 60 seconds. They've got quick withdrawals. They've got easy gameplay. They've got a huge selection of both players and stat types. PrizePicks really is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And they put a little extra cheese on your Whopper with big promotions like Taco Tuesday, where each Tuesday, PrizePicks will discount certain player projections by up to 25%. That gets you even more value. And they've made it so easy. Now PrizePicks even has Apple Pay, so you can get quick and easy deposits into the football and the basketball season. Hit it up, man. I'm looking for Lamar Jackson and Christian McCaffrey this weekend, and I know you're going to have fun with PrizePicks. Get in on the action. Go right now to prizepicks.com/83weeks and use our code 83weeks. You'll get a first deposit match of up to $100. You heard me. Go to prizepicks.com/83weeks. Use our code 83weeks for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/83weeks. And the code is 83weeks. Daily fantasy sports made easy. PrizePicks. So Eric, we got a lot of feedback from last week's show. People were still fired up about it, but I do want to talk a little bit about what's coming this weekend, because we are right around the corner from what I think is one of the tentpole events in all of wrestling, the Royal Rumble. And back as far as I can remember, this has been one of my favorite pay-per-views. And we all remind each other of this every year. It's worth reminding everybody right now. A Pat Patterson creation. He took what was old and stale and not very good, a battle royal. As a kid and on a poster, it made a lot of sense and it was easy to get excited about. Hey, instead of one-on-one or a tag team match with 4 guys in a match, what if there were 20? What if there were 30? But then you actually see it and you realize, well, they're not allowed to do anything except lean on the ropes and throw forearms and punches and chops and tease picking a leg up. Like once you've seen one battle royal, you've sort of seen them all. But in typical Eric Bischoff fashion, I wanted to give you a minute to just talk about the Royal Rumble, because one of the things you laid out when you were first getting ready to launch Nitro is the data that you had gotten from this study, that what wrestling fans wanted to be, what they got excited about, maybe more than anything else, was the surprise element. And the idea that the Royal Rumble basically took an old, tired, kind of a waste of time match on a wrestling card that was almost a value add. You know, they'd have some matches listed on the poster plus this big battle royal, but it wasn't very fun. But we added some anticipation. We added some surprise. And man, this is like the match that everybody keeps coming back to. I think they get tired of the Elimination Chamber. I think they get tired of Hell in a Cell. I think we can get tired of a ladder match or scared of a ladder match because of the perceived injury, the Money in the Banks and things like that. But a Royal Rumble, just a tiny little twist, and it's a whole fresh paint of coat, as Bruce would say.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, it is my favorite pay-per-view, really. I mean, I love the spectacle of WrestleMania. I will always be amazed every time I see one, just how big the industry has become.
Yeah.
And I love that. That's my thing. But Royal Rumble is really, I think, the most interesting pay-per-view of the year, because historically the Royal Rumble, the outcome, the stakes, go again, a storytelling must have, the stakes are there. How many times have we seen the outcome of the Royal Rumble pretty much set the direction going forward?
Right.
Talent who won it. It's a big move.
It is.
Storyline wise, everyone. It's a big move, right? So what do we have as a result? We have anticipation. You've got story, you've got anticipation, you've got reality. The reality is the authenticity of it. Format in this case. It's something that everybody knows. It's organic, it's unique to WWE. So you can check the reality box with regard to the format and just the basic premise of it all. Story, anticipation, reality, surprise, boom, there you go.
Yep.
That's a biggie. That's like of the 5 elements, that's the one that really matters the most. I would say surprise and anticipation are the 2 that are almost like milk and cookies, and they go together. But there, any action is the action. It's self-fulfilling as a result of what it is. So it's a perfect SARSA formula, controversy equation, call it whatever you want. But it's the reason why. It's the reason why the Royal Rumble, Pat Patterson's creation, one little tweak, as you pointed out, and it's in a class all of its own as far as paper.
It's really amazing. And we've got a lot of stories going into this year's, as we're recording. There's only been a handful of folks who've been announced for the women's battle royal, the women's Royal Rumble match. Bayley has announced that she's in. Nia Jax has announced that she's in. Becky Lynch has announced that she's in. Bianca Belair's in. Maxine Dupree is in. And I'm sure we'll see more and more announced as Raw and SmackDown come to fruition this week. Of course, tonight and this Friday. On the women's side, can you call it? Do you have a prediction for who might get their hand raised and move on to the next step?
No, don't. I don't follow WWE consistently enough to have a feel for anything. So no, I don't. I should, but I don't.
Over on the men's side, we've got Tozawa, Otis, Chad Gamble, Gunther, Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, Shinsuke Nakamura, and who most people assume it's going to come down to Cody Rhodes and CM Punk. Now, of course, I don't have any inside knowledge. You and I don't really do that, but it does feel like if I were booking the Rumble and I got down to the final 4, I might want to have Cody Rhodes and CM Punk in that final 4. There's always a big emphasis on the final 4. I feel like you got to have them in there. What say you?
I agree. I think Punk needs to be. Cody's made man right now.
Yeah.
We don't know what ultimately how the story is going to end, but he's a made man. Punk came in, a lot of hoopla, great reaction from the audience. Not really involved in anything meaningful right now, is he? I mean, he's there.
I think a lot of people are waiting to see what happens with him and Seth Rollins. Of course, Seth Rollins hurt his knee in the main event.
Yeah, the injury certainly threw a wrench in it.
But now the debate is, will he be back in time for WrestleMania? I mean, you could see it was all over his face at the end of the show. That's what he was thinking about too. I got to get to WrestleMania. It does feel like the rumor and innuendo was that it was going to be Punk and Seth Rollins, perhaps main eventing night 1. I mean, I've heard people talk about that as if it were a foregone conclusion. Well, that makes you wonder, with 2 big pay-per-views to go before we get there, the Royal Rumble this weekend and the Elimination Chamber down in Perth, Australia next month, we're going to figure out who goes where. Once upon a time, if you go back in time to the 1997 Royal Rumble in San Antonio, Steve Austin was thrown out, but then he snuck back in because none of the referees saw it, and he managed to win the thing. So what they did to sort of right the ship is they did In Your House Final 4 in February in Chattanooga, with the idea being the winner, as we do a rematch, this 4-way match, would go on to get that title shot against Shawn Michaels. Of course, in the meantime, Shawn lost his smile, and whoever won that match was going to be the champion. So I think they've got some decisions to make. And all of a sudden, I think what happens this weekend got a little more interesting, because what if they do decide we're going to take the belt off of Seth and we're going to do something in Elimination Chamber, and whoever wins that is the champ? It's going to be interesting to see how they get there. But you see Drew, he's out here calling out CM Punk every chance he gets. So it feels like If I were,
yeah, but and isn't Drew's contractual status kind of up in the air a little bit?
I don't.
Do we know?
I don't believe so.
Don't think so.
No, I don't know that to be true, but I don't believe that there's a concern that Drew's not sticking around.
Where would he go?
Well, I'm just saying, if I was Drew, I'd be happy. WWE.
I would too. He's an amazing character. And he's been, it's kind of like he's been, the theme of the show is going to be top heavy talent, so to speak. Drew's one of those guys that is a top talent. There's potential there. I know he had his run as champion during COVID. All right. He's still, in my opinion, an untapped potential. I don't think we've seen the best of Drew yet. But he's been he's there. He's in the mix, but he's kind of off to the side a little bit. That's a great opportunity to bring a sleeper. Fire him back up. Get him back into the top of the ticket, so to speak. It's fun. That's what's fun about the Royal Rumble. I was driving around yesterday because there was 2 football games on yesterday, right? And I love listening to CBS Sports, especially this time of year, because I really appreciate the way radio analysts entertain their audience versus television analysts, the way they entertain their audience. And it occurred to me, again, I'm going to go back to story here, but it's relative to what we're talking about. The game is the game, but what drives interest in the game in a large part is the just plethora of conversation between ESPN and all the CBS Sports and all the other talking heads. And they're all talking about the story behind the teams or the story behind the players. And here you've got Royal Rumble, which provides so many opportunities because the outcome, as we talked about earlier, kind of creates a trajectory for the winner more often than not. So there's all this chatter about Royal Rumble, which in some respects, I think, makes it better environment than even WrestleMania. WrestleMania is a spectacle, but people talking about the outcome and discussing the potential matchups and discussing where guys could go or women could go or not go, all based around the Royal Rumble, kind of elevates it to a status all of its own in that regard as well.
We should talk about the rest of the Rumble card, but before we do, I just want to let everybody know that I think one of the reasons we all love the Royal Rumble is the nostalgia. Because when we were a kid, and I remember really believing this, anybody could win the Royal Rumble. I was friends with little kids in my neighborhood who liked wrestling, and they were convinced one of the Bushwhackers were going to win the Royal Rumble. Now, of course, as an adult, I wouldn't be so silly to think that. But man, back then, that's when, we really loved wrestling and we really loved eating cereal first thing in the morning, watching old episodes of Superstars or the syndicated show. And you can relive that nostalgia with the Royal Rumble and Magic Spoon this weekend. Magic Spoon is going to help a lot of folks hit their New Year's goals. If you're looking for more protein and less sugar, but maybe you're tired of the blandness of adult cereal, buddy, Magic Spoon is for you. They've reinvented your favorite childhood cereals to taste great, but they contain less than 0 grams of sugar. How about this? 13 to 14 grams of protein and only 4 or 5 grams of carbs per serving. It's keto friendly, it's gluten free, it's grain free, it's soy free. It's a way to relive all of those favorite moments, watching your favorite cartoons or old school wrestling, but only having 140 calories a serving. And when I say they recreated all your favorites, I mean it. Check out some of these different flavors. They've got cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, blueberry muffin, maple waffle, honey nut, birthday cake, chocolate chip cookie, and cinnamon roll. Yeah, cinnamon roll. That's Cassio's favorite. Our buddy Dave Silva, he likes to combine 2 of them. He'll take a little peanut butter, put a little cocoa on top. He calls it his peanut butter cup. I don't know why he says it so fast, but he absolutely loves it. Arn Anderson's a big fan of the maple waffle. I actually rock with that chocolate chip cookie. Throw a little milk on there, hard to beat. Magic Spoon also has treats. You know the kind. Just like those marshmallow treats you had as a kid, but this time with only 1 gram of sugar and only 1 or 2 grams of net carbs. But these are packed with 11 grams of proteins per bar. And they've got a couple of different flavors. Marshmallow, just like you grew up on. And check this one out. Chocolatey peanut butter. These are snacks that you don't have to feel guilty about. I have to tell you, I absolutely love this stuff. I think you will too. It is a much better for you, much healthier opportunity. If you're looking for something that tastes great, has a lot of protein, but doesn't have a lot of sugar, head to magicspoon.com/83weeks and grab yourself a custom bundle of cereal and try the magic for yourself. And don't forget to add in their delicious treats for the on the go. Be sure to use our promo code 83weeks at checkout. You'll save an extra $5 off of your order. By the way, I should mention Magic Spoon's so confident in this product, they back it with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, start the new year off right with a delicious bowl of high protein cereal at magicspoon.com/83weeks and use the code 83weeks to save $5 off. We thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring today's episode. Let's do a little bit more about our Royal Rumble breakdown, if you will. I think if I had to guess, it's going to come down to Drew McIntyre, Shinsuke Nakamura, CM Punk, and Cody Rhodes in the final 4. Let's see what happens. Speaking of 4, there is a fatal 4-way match with Roman putting both of his titles on the line against Randy Orton, against AJ Styles, and against LA Knight. You want to talk about putting everything into a tailspin?
Holy smokes.
Right? What if?
Holy smokes.
I'm not saying it happens, but what if? Because when you take a look at that, you realize technically Roman could lose the belts without being pinned. And now there's a whole new conversation. I don't think that's going to happen.
Oh my gosh. Is that interesting?
Let's take a look at that graphic again, Silva. As you take a look at this, Eric, you got a jacked AJ Styles who looks better than ever. He looks like a real life action figure. He's huge. So is Randy Orton. They've both been on that WrestleMania diet, looking better than ever. And here's LA Knight, who's just, hotter than bacon grease, as they say in the South. Taking on Roman Reigns, who's got this incredible run, an incredible presentation. It's a fatal 4-way. What do you think?
Wow. That I'm interested in. And again, I'll be interested in the match and the physicality within a match, because all of these guys are phenomenal. I mean, it's going to be really fun aesthetically to watch. But strategically, that's what I'm most fascinated by. Not what happens, but where it goes. That's awesome. 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 Talk about a myriad of opportunities with no bad answer. Let's do this. Okay, that'll work great. No, let's do this. That'll work great too. I got an idea. Let's do that. That'll work great too. I mean, man, if you're on that creative team, you're loving the challenge of figuring out what's the best solution and action. That's awesome.
It makes you wonder, with the Elimination Chamber around the corner, do they use some shady shenanigans to take that match and add to it? Now, there have been reports, who knows what's real and what's not, but Dave Meltzer's been pretty adamant that Roman Reigns is not going to Perth, Australia. But at the same time, I say all that to say that he also recently wasn't convinced that Sasha Banks was going to AEW and says she could show up in the Royal Rumble. Sean Ross Sapp was adamant, no chance Sasha shows up at the Rumble. Sean is convinced she's going to AEW. Can you imagine WWE trying to sell this big monster pay-per-view like the Elimination Chamber and allegedly double down on their international growth, and they don't take Roman Reigns? That feels like that would be difficult for me to buy into.
Does the shit stain give any reason why he doesn't think he's going, or is he being?
I think he's just heard that he's not there. I mean, I think
rumor has it that's what they believe.
Yes.
Okay. Well, who knows? I don't know. I don't get bogged down in shit that Dave Meltzer says or anybody else says.
Well, what would you do with this with 4-way then? This Saturday rather. What would you do? LA Knight, Randy Orton, AJ Styles, Roman.
It all comes down to, from a business perspective, who do they want to elevate?
Right.
Who do they want to take a step up? Arguably, I would look at, for a discussion, I would say LA Knight. Come from out of nowhere. His star is ascending. He hasn't reached peak. Certainly hasn't gone over peak. He's making forward progress. Fast. So there's an argument for that discussion. I think AJ Styles has been a sleeper that can over-deliver. An argument there too. Randy, as much as I love character that Randy brings to the table, as much as I absolutely think he is the hottest performer in the last 20 years, certainly as a heel. I'm less inclined to think that that's the direction they would go. I don't know. And I love your scenario. Imagine Roman Reigns getting beat, or losing his titles, but he never got pinned. There's a premise for you.
Well, I just think
there's about 6 months of television waiting to happen.
It would be interesting. SmackDown went off the air this past Friday with an RKO on Roman Reigns. It would be interesting to think about, because just last week we were talking about how you sort of threw out there that AI could actually help with wrestling creative. And the guys over at The Ringer put together what we agreed was a pretty cool storyline between Cody and Randy. I could totally see that at one of the nights at WrestleMania.
That storyline, by the way, I wish we could play that here. Maybe we will next week, because this whole AI thing is probably going to come up again. But the story that AI platform, whichever one they used, kicked out, was really pretty freaking interesting.
Agree.
And would provide a great premise. And I would have never even considered Cody and Randy until we heard that on that podcast. I went, not that exact story, but damn, it's a great framework of a story that you could tweak and have some fun with. And
yeah,
it would take a whole lot of work to make that make sense.
You got to think too that whatever they're going to do here in this fatal 4-way is going to be important based on the results of the Men's Royal Rumble and the Elimination Chamber and Seth Rollins. So there's lots of little wrinkles that we're going to discover. I think most people would assume that Punk is going to win the Rumble and call out Seth Rollins, or that Cody's going to go back to back and call out Roman Reigns. It'll be interesting to see how we get there. I know you and I are going to be watching it together. It's Top Guy Rumble weekend. We're going to be in Tampa, and everyone who is a Top Guy over on adfreeshows.com is invited. We've got a full schedule planned. We're going to have a lot of fun, lots of fun silliness lined up. And we want to thank all of you for all of your support over at adfreeshows.com. And hey, shout out to everybody who showed up early on a Sunday morning to watch along with us here. Greg Jacobson and Josh Hinney and Alex Wheaton and Coach Keith and so many other folks who were here. Little Jimmy Sorensen, PJ Taints. And as I'm scrolling up, you guys are really active in the live chat today. Thank you guys, Noble and Leon and Carl and everybody, for showing up and hanging out with us. Let's do a few questions from our live studio audience. Coach Keith wants to know, Eric, this might be too soon to say, but with everything going on right now, do you think this could be one of the best Royal Rumbles ever, or at least top 5? And that, Eric, to me is a great question, because it sort of dovetails into what we're trying to talk about eventually here today. Is there too much talent at the top? Because a lot of times when we would watch a Royal Rumble, we kind of knew going in, well, this guy's going to win. or that guy's going to win. Like, I think last year, everybody I was watching with sort of knew, okay, so Cody's winning. Cody's back and he's winning the Rumble. I don't know if I can call it this year. Will it be, CM Punk? Will it be Cody? Or could they go a different direction since there's so many question marks about what The Rock's doing and what Seth's doing? I think not being able to call it adds a lot to the enjoyment. What say you?
Absolutely. There's the anticipation and the surprise. Action comes with the product. It's just absolutely. And I do agree. For me, now I'm going to be honest again, man. I've always enjoyed the Royal Rumble. I've always felt the same way about it in terms of the hierarchy of pay-per-views and putting it right up there, right behind WrestleMania. But I've never been as interested as I am right now. So that suggests to me that because I'm pretty average. I'm a passive viewer when it comes to WWE and AEW. Wrestling in general. I'm not like a diehard every Monday night, every Wednesday, every Friday kind of guy. I'll drop in here and there. Look, Samoa Joe caught my eye. I'm going to drop in. I watched the whole show, most of it as a result. But I don't know, man. I do agree. I think this is probably going to be, if not the best, one of the best Royal Rumbles. But it is because they've got so many great talents, any of whom arguably could be the guy. It's just a question of which one would be the best guy.
We talked a lot about how crowded at the top you really got once upon a time in WCW. We rattled off all the top names, like Hulk Hogan, like the Macho Man, like Sting, like Lex Luger, like Diamond Dallas Page, like Goldberg, like Kevin Nash, like Scott Hall, like Ric Flair. I mean, just on and on and on. There's so much top talent there. And I wonder, man, this is going to be interesting to see how they put together this year's WrestleMania. I say that because even in the most recent Wrestling Observer, it was written that the main event could be Rock versus Roman, or it could be Roman versus Cody, or it could be a 3-way. Basically means Dave doesn't know what it is, but that's fine.
Dave never knows.
But a 3-way at WrestleMania, could you see the match coming down to being Roman defending against both Cody and The Rock? And if they went that way, could The Rock be the one to deliver a rock bottom, but Cody steals the victory? So Cody's the champ, even though it was The Rock's move that put him down. Does that build?
See, I don't like that. I don't like that because now you're giving it to Cody with a dent.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like, here's this beautiful new car. I'm giving it to you. You worked so hard. I'm going to really reward you for all of your efforts. And yeah, I know this. I know there's a dent in the side, but just pretend it's not there. I don't know. I don't like that. I don't like that outcome at all. I don't see it. I hope that's not the case. First of all, I got to say, nothing surprises me anymore. Could it happen? Sure. Do I think it'll happen? No, for the very reason I just mentioned, because then Cody going forward has got a dent. And I just don't think that makes sense to me.
I, for one, would like for Cody to not win the title that way. I agree with you. But what do you do hypothetically? Because I just want to remind everybody that Endeavor does more than just UFC and WWE. I know a lot of people, I know a lot of people who were sort of inside the bubble of the wrestling world think, okay, Endeavor has WWE and UFC. Well, and a lot of that involves film. So if The Rock really is one of the biggest stars in the world, and everyone seems to be in agreement on that, that's a consensus. And he's making a lot of movies with this company, and he's one of your biggest stars and one of your biggest line items. And he says, hey man, I sure would like to wrestle at WrestleMania. How do you say no? He's got to be there. I mean, whether you want to do that or not, I mean, I know I advocated that he was not a value add. You don't have to have him, but if he wants to do it, kind of got to do it to placate him on all your other stuff, right?
I don't know if I don't know Rock at all. I have an impression of him. And that impression is informed to a certain degree by people that work with him. So however accurate my impression of Rock is or isn't, happens to be that that would be a self-serving for Rock, but it's a self-serving move that he absolutely doesn't need.
Right.
Is he going to take that position to feed his ego? I don't think he has an ego that needs to be fed. This guy's on top of the freaking world. I want to believe, therefore my position is going to be that Rock wants to bring his rockness to the table so that it benefits the company going forward, because I would believe that Rock's relationship with Endeavor runs very, very deep, as you pointed out, and the benefits of Rock bringing his rockness to WWE to benefit the business will parlay into better and more opportunities going forward between Rock and Endeavor than going, no, I haven't been on WrestleMania in a long time. I really want it because I feel like I need the shine. I can't see that being motivation. Yeah. I want to believe, because of things that I've heard about Rock, that he's going to do what's best for business, and what's best for business is leveraging his rockness to benefit, whether it be Cody or somebody else, to elevate them to a higher level. That's what I want to believe. And I do. I choose to believe.
Allegedly, it was supposed to happen last year, but they couldn't make a deal work. And of course, we know maybe now why. The timing was they were putting together this Endeavor deal that would actually be announced the very next day. So maybe they didn't want to change a lot of things that were on the books or things like that, just so everybody understands, like that due diligence period. You don't go making drastic changes while all of that's happening. Now, with seemingly most of that behind you, I think you try to placate the biggest star. And I just want to remind everybody, this is the 25-year anniversary of his first WrestleMania main event, which was also in Philadelphia in 1999.
Oh, there you go. Throwing those facts on the table to muck up my thing.
And he's done about 1,000 movies with Kevin Hart, who is also from Philadelphia. So it stands to me that these guys who are always top of the food chain, and I mean, if The Rock or Kevin Hart want to do something at the Super Bowl, they just pick up the phone and guess what? They're doing something at the Super Bowl. We've seen that before. And it wouldn't surprise me to see them do something there. But I'm curious, you're uniquely qualified to answer this. How are they going to be able to keep all of this top talent happy? I mean, we've seen, according to the rumor and innuendo, that there were talent in AEW who didn't feel like they were being utilized as much as they could. Meanwhile, I think as fans, we all say, but the creative on WWE is so much better. That doesn't mean there's still not frustration. Everybody, shouldn't say everybody, nearly everyone in that women and men's locker room in WWE want to be the top guy, Eric, but they can't all be.
No, you can't all be. And that's one of the mistakes that I made, WCW made, going back, is bringing in so much top talent so quickly. And we didn't have, we had 12 pay-per-views a year and one television show, prime time, initially. I started bringing in all that top talent. WWE has 2 primetime television shows, and God knows how many PLEs I've lost count, in addition to all these massive events that they do internationally, like Saudi, and are going to do more of. So the opportunity to keep your top talent busy, making money, feeling productive, getting opportunities, not just sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring. WWE has a much better opportunity to utilize a deeper roster than I did. But the problem, I'll just talk about my problem, because I'm not in WWE. I don't know what it's like to have their situation. Can only imagine it. But I live mine. So let's talk about that. it was so exciting to bring in all this new talent because you get the buzz, you get the chatter, you get, you get the perceived momentum, which eventually becomes actual momentum as a result. Perception becomes reality, so to speak. And initially, all that top talent comes in. They're getting paid well, probably just like AEW. They're getting paid well, in some cases, as much or more money than they made previously, similar to AEW right now. And initially, that talent, they're just happy to be on the team. They're happy for the financial security. They're very grateful for it, especially guys that are getting towards the end of their careers. Roddy Piper, Randy Savage. Hulk was in a different category all of his own. But a lot of that older, established, top star talent, they were so excited to walk into a situation where they knew how much money they were going to make next year. Not this year, next year. Because that was new to them. And that stability is, the older you are, the more important it becomes. Obvious reasons. But as I've said before, that wears off. Then what you're left with is the essence of talent. The essence of talent, the reason why I say essence, the reason they become performers as opposed to accountants or architects or jet pilots or truck drivers is because they have this inherent love to. Something draws them to the stage we call professional wrestling, much like actors and actresses are drawn to Broadway or to Hollywood. Their need to perform is real. It's part of their DNA. And it's what makes them exceptional in that regard when they stick with it and pursue it and develop it. But once you take a talent, whether it's an actor, an actress, or professional wrestler, or a musician, and they're no longer able to satisfy that inherent need to perform, it drives them as much as hunger sometimes. Just a different kind of hunger. Feeds their souls. And when you get too many of them, and you just don't have a way to satisfy that need to perform, eventually it manifests in resentment, frustration, anger, all the things that follow those emotions. And it can become, as it was in my case, very difficult to manage. And I struggled with it because I was a talent, but I wasn't driven by being a talent. I just happened to end up being a talent. It wasn't my goal. I didn't think about it when I was young. I never aspired to it. It just fucking happened. Right. But I would often, initially, when it first started happening to me, when I was started to deal with the resentment, the jealousy, and the anger, and the frustration, all the things that come along with a performer that's not able to perform to his or her abilities or goals, I would be like, what the fuck, dude? Hey, did your check show up? Remember that check, that thing you were so excited about? Remember when you hugged me at the end of our contract negotiation and it was literally a tear in your eye because now you knew you could provide for your family long term? You remember that conversation? What happened? What happened? Well, what happened is they get used to it. That sense of fulfillment and security just kind of fades away. And that flame, that core, that driver that makes that talent who they became in order to get that contract starts burning hotter and hotter and hotter, and things unwind. We all know people in AEW that we're friendly with, hear from occasionally. This is not new. This is going on for a while. You get so much top talent like Tony got in there. Everybody's happy. Yay, rah, rah. Oh my gosh, I'm part of this. This is great. And then the chatter starts. Then the frustration starts. Then the resentment starts. And then that's when morale starts really deteriorating. It becomes a real management problem. It starts affecting your creative. It did mine. Speak for myself. Now you're starting to try to compromise and try to find a way to keep everybody as satisfied as possible. Guess what suffers? Creative. Because you're compromising. You're not looking at your roster as a producer going, okay, I've got all of these weapons in my arsenal. Each one of these talents is a weapon. They may not be the exact same weapon. They're different weapons. That's a bazooka. That's a grenade launcher. That's a machine gun. That's a flamethrower. You got this wide arsenal of weapons of war, or being television ratings and competition success in general, competing with yourself to be successful. Can't use them all at once. You got to use this one over here for this kind of this particular battle. We'll save this one over here till the battle advance, whatever. Get my point. But when that resentment, that vibe, the morale starts deteriorating, my first instinct was to try to placate. Okay, you're right. You haven't been on a pay-per-view. You haven't been featured as a main eventer now in 4 months or 6 months or whatever it is. Okay, let's see if we can work something out. That's a compromise. As opposed to looking at your roster as a cast of actors and being able to let the creative drive the casting decisions, you're now letting the actors drive casting decisions. Or you're dealing with the negativity and the morale that's a fallout as a result of it. That makes sense?
Yes.
All right. Wasn't sure. I lost myself.
Let's talk a little bit about LA Knight. You know, you mentioned earlier that you might consider doing something with him at the 4-way at the Rumble. I don't see that. I do think he's super hot. I think he needs to be positioned correctly at WrestleMania. There's been lots of rumor and innuendo that his WrestleMania opponent might actually be Logan Paul. Logan Paul is going to be taking on Kevin Owens this weekend at the Royal Rumble. And if you saw their interaction on TV a few weeks ago, it got physical. Kevin Owens clipped him for real. Logan's been sporting a huge black eye on his podcast and his appearances. And then they did battle in a little promo battle, if you will, this past Friday on SmackDown. What would you do with Logan Paul this weekend? And do you think he is the right opponent for Logan Paul and the United States Championship at WrestleMania?
Kevin Owens, the right opponent?
LA Knight. Do you think LA Knight winning the rumor is it's LA Knight and Logan Paul at WrestleMania? What do you think of that? And how would you get there knowing that this Kevin Owens match is on the docket?
I wouldn't go there. Just wouldn't.
You don't like Logan and LA Knight together?
No. They're both ascending. That will stall somebody's ascent. Why would you do that?
Well, I would argue that I don't think you have to have Logan Paul to be the U.S. champion. I don't think he has to have that. I think Logan Paul being such a huge name and having that title belt, I think you only put that belt on Logan Paul so he can help elevate someone, and that someone be LA Knight. Like that makes sense.
Or it puts the final kind of seal of approval, credibility on Logan, because Logan came in as an attraction. He came in as a YouTube star.
Yes.
Brought all his audience with him, and everyone, holy shit, this guy can wrestle like crazy. He wrestles like he's been in the ring for 15 years. And he's this major success story. When you take somebody from outside the business, thrust them into the business at a very high level, and then they over deliver to the extent that Paul has, you still want to give him that stamp of credibility amongst the wrestling fans. And I think the U.S. title was a great way to do that. And that's my long-winded way of saying I absolutely agree with you. He doesn't need that title. I think the title served him.
Yeah.
It served the purpose. It wasn't just, let's just put a title on him. It served a purpose, and it put the period at the end of his credibility sentence. But now it's time to move on. So yeah, I could see it. Will losing the title hurt Paul? No. See, now I'm changing my mind because I'm thinking would getting that title from Paul help LA Knight?
I think so.
Abso-fucking-lutely it would. Therefore, everything I just said previously about it, two ascending stars just went out the window because I didn't consider the belt transition. So yeah, I could see it. It does make sense. I'd love to see LA Knight continuing to ascend. I don't want to see him stall out. Now, I'm going to throw this out while we're talking about LA Knight. I was thinking about this yesterday. I wanted to bring it up. I would love our listeners. First of all, we have the most, in my opinion, erudite, intelligent audience of any wrestling podcast out there.
I'm going to Google erudite.
Huh?
I'm Googling erudite.
Okay. Doctors, heart surgeons, lawyers that argue cases in front of the Supreme Court, actors, established, credible actors, sportscasters, nationally known sportscasters, athletes. They're all people that listen to 83 Weeks, follow us, communicate with me through DMs and so forth and social media. We have a really, really intelligent audience. But I would like to put it to the audience. If in your spare time, you're looking for something to do, you want to crunch some numbers and pick out a nugget of fact that nobody else has really talked about in depth, but also to support it with detail and fact. I'd like our audience to look into the fact that, well, here's the question. Of the top 10 wrestlers over the last 5 years, how many of them have been in the business for less than 10 years? How many superstars? Now, what's a superstar? Now, for a long time, WWE, if they put you in front of a camera holding a microphone, you were considered a WWE superstar. I, on the other hand, have a little different opinion of a superstar. So we have to probably build some parameters out there. And let's just throw a couple off the top of my head. Let's say a top talent who has been in at least 3 pay-per-views in any calendar year. Let's just use that to start with. We may dig into it a little. How many top talents that have been in the main event of at least 3 pay-per-views in any calendar year have ever been in the business for less than 10 years before they got that opportunity? It's going to be fun to look at that. And I think that LA Knight is such a great example. Like, if I owned a wrestling company, if I was a general man, a legitimate, not an on-camera general, I had some influence and talent, I would be using LA Knight as a motivational opportunity every day. Here's the guy we're talking about him at the very top of the card here.
Yes.
He's been in the business for what, 20 years?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. I don't even know. Been a long time. And he's been down at the bottom and barely making it and struggling and probably had every reason to believe this was like the worst career decision in the world, long term. And then he breaks out. It clicks. It's a moment, either because of the writing team that helped find him, or he found himself, much like Stone Cold Steve Austin did when he found Stone Cold Steve Austin in ECW, back when Vince wanted him to be the ringmaster. But Steve already knew. He felt Stone Cold Steve Austin. He developed that character. He became Stone Cold Steve Austin just a little bit in ECW. And when the ringmaster gimmick flopped as it should have, Steve had Stone Cold Steve Austin in his back pocket. That's an example of what can happen if you stick to it. Don't get depressed. Don't let people around you drag you down. Don't let anybody convince you it can't happen, because if you work hard and you have fun and you learn, you progress, you adapt, and you're not so focused and myopic, your time can come. And I think because of LA Knight's success recently and because of his story, his real life story, I just think I would want him to get that U.S. championship just because he fucking deserves it. And he's a great motivational example for talent. And man, if Shawn Michaels isn't pointing to new talent that's coming through the door, if he's not pointing to LA Knight and saying, guys, this is not going to be easy, gals, this is not going to be easy. Just because you're here doesn't mean you're going to end up there, meaning WWE, prime time. But you're going to get an opportunity to learn, and it may be hard. Here's a guy over here. See this guy over here who's at the very top of the card? You all wish you had his opportunity. Well, look at the path it took for him to get there. That's valuable. That's an asset. I love that story. So, yeah, I want him to get it. I don't even know how we got off on that.
Well, I asked, and you said you would absolutely positively not have Logan Paul work with LA Knight. And then
but I changed my mind. Come on.
Then you did a 180. By the way, I did a little quick research, easy for me to say. Off the top of my head, guys who've been in main events I just went back to last year, who've been in the business less than 10 years. So far, I've nailed down MJF, Darby Allin, and Dominic Mysterio. To your point, not a ton of guys at the top of the card who haven't been around more than 10 years.
Not taking anything away from MJF or Darby Allin, but come on. It's a little different. I mean, different competitive environment. Let's put it. Whatever. Okay. I'll stand. Yes, they're there. And I think MJF for sure deserves that position. Absolutely.
One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about is your wiener, and how even at your advanced stage, you've been able to get it just harder than a rock. And it's all thanks to our friends at BlueChew.com. Carnivore diet. Come on. The thing that works like Popeye is BlueChew, except maybe it's not going to be your forearms that are bulging. You see, BlueChew is a unique online service that delivers you the same active ingredient as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Eric loves surprising Mrs. B. He calls it a hot tag for his wiener. You can take them anytime, day or night, so plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. Yeah, that's right. We're trying to get your wiener on the gas. Get your dick on the gas. Get your wiener some PEDs. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And no, Dr. Zahorian does not work at BlueChew.com. The best part, it's all done online. No visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. But there won't be anything discreet about your package. BlueChew wants to help you have better sex, so discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Try BlueChew free when you use our promo code 83weeks at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is 83weeks to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring today's podcast. One of the other things we haven't talked about, and it's a big name. We've heard he's coming back, and we've heard it's going to happen, quote unquote, sooner rather than later. Of course, we all look around the corner and realize this weekend's the Royal Rumble. So a lot of people are under the impression that Andrade is going to be returning to WWE. As I understand it, there have been some patterns you could watch. Of course, he gave notice. He's officially finished up with AEW 3 weeks ago, but I think some of his independent bookings have been canceled. A lot of people are jumping to the conclusion, oh, that must mean he's back with WWE. But the name that's been bandied about as being back sooner rather than later. Talked about a big name. How about not just in name, but in stature? Brock Lesnar, supposedly coming back to WWE. What in the world? We were just talking about how crowded this space is. If Brock comes back, you got to think in a normal year, okay, he's in the conversation to win the Rumble. If that's not the direction they go, man, he's got to do something at WrestleMania. And I, for one, hope that he's here to chase a title of a different kind. What about him and Gunther at WrestleMania, dude?
Ooh, I mean, aesthetically,
can you imagine
the poster?
Yes.
Just the poster gets me excited. That's great. That's a great option. That would be awesome. Great for Gunther too.
It would be great for Gunther. It'd be curious to see what they do. Of course, right now there's lots of, it's funny that we talk about how the wrestling business is cyclical. And I know that there's a lot of people who are always complaining about creative, and I get that. But once upon a time, there was so much criticism about the way the belts were quote unquote hot potatoed. Oh, they don't mean anything anymore and all this sort of stuff. Now Roman and Gunther are both like on their way to setting records. I mean, Gunther's already the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion. And seemingly Roman's not too far away from Hogan. He's passed almost everyone else, like besides Bruno, of course. These titles all of a sudden mean a lot. So normally I would say no chance they're going to put Brock in there with Gunther for the Intercontinental title, but I don't know. Right. I mean, he's never had the Intercontinental title. He's held the world title every which way but loose. He's won the Royal Rumble. I could get behind that. I could see that. Not Cody, but Gunther and Brock.
I mean, like I said, aesthetically, I get very excited about that. I mean, two great characters, kind of in some ways similar. Not physically, but in terms of their characters. But doesn't it feel like it's too much all at once? I mean, would it? I'm asking this as a question. I don't know. It's just like, this is the first time I heard Brock's coming back or maybe coming back. But it's like, yeah, wouldn't you just want to spread some of this out a little bit? There's just so much good stuff. Are you really maximizing it if it's all happening at once? That goes back to all this great top talent. Are we too top heavy? Are you shooting your wad too fast? Are you satisfying the audience too much so that there's nowhere to go?
It feels
I don't know the answer to that, but it feels that way.
It also feels like if you're really going to get stringent on the brand split, now's the time to do it. Because now all of a sudden you have enough top talent. You really could sort of have your own little promotion within a promotion on Raw and do the exact same thing on SmackDown. But when you see guys who are on both shows, and I understand the strategy behind that right now, when you're trying to get, brand new home for Monday Night Raw and you're leaving USA, you gotta do what you can to really pump that show up. But while not also abandoning your commitments on the SmackDown side. But man, with Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins and CM Punk and Brock Lesnar and Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens and the Usos and Cody and LA Knight. I mean, this feels like old school WCW. It's just so freaking crowded. And I guess lost in all of this, we haven't discussed it at all, is the whole Bloodline storyline. I mean, that has been the thing that has carried this to where it is, but there was a pay-per-view last year and it's a press conference. So of course, Paul Heyman's in character, but when he was asked, where do you think you are in the Bloodline story? And he said something like the third inning, that they're a third of the way through the Bloodline story. I don't know, man. Where do you think they are? Is there a lesson you learned through your WCW days about, because I know we've talked a lot here before that one of your bigger regrets is you didn't have a conclusive end to the NWO. Are we getting close to that concern, do you think, for the Bloodline story?
Potentially, and it kind of goes to what we were just talking about with all of these other stories and big stories and headlines and returns and Rock coming back and now Brock coming back and LA Knight's on an ascension. Logan Paul's off the charts hot. Cody, this story has been evolving now since last year and before. I mean, there's just so much of it. And I haven't heard a conversation about Bloodline. Peace.
Right.
We're close. We'll say this. Potentially, we're close to getting to a point of just dropping something hot. But I think a lot remains to be seen. Let's see what happens at WrestleMania. We will be able to answer this question definitively in ways that no one will be able to argue with the day after WrestleMania. Right now, I'm still kind of in a hopeful wait and see mode with regard to the Bloodline. I hope Paul Heyman was right. I don't care if we're in the last third. I don't care if we've only got one inning left. Pay it off. Don't do what I did. Don't build up something so great. I mean, really, the Bloodline storyline, as I've said before, without question, the best storyline in wrestling in the last 30 years. I won't even argue with anybody that feels differently because they're coming at the argument place of ignorance, and I don't waste time with that. But wow, I hope that they do, because it would be really unfortunate if they don't. I can't imagine they don't have a plan. And again, I've said this before, patterns, man. I see a dot here, a dot here, a dot here, a dot here. I have a unique ability to connect dots in a way that creates a picture that's right most of the time. That's being able to see into the future in reality, being able to anticipate things based on what you see happening in front of you. That is more or less obscure because it's kind of happening behind the scenes, so to speak. But I hope, all I can say is I hope. I wouldn't want to see it, but let's see what happens after WrestleMania. Let's see what happens. Boy, oh boy, if they drop that one, holy smokes, that's going to make me and Sting and Hogan look good.
Well, listen, we know it's going to get crowded at the top over on the other side. It is going to be interesting to see what they do at the Royal Rumble. It's going to be interesting to see what they do at Elimination Chamber. Let's do a little bit more of the feedback that we got. I wanted to highlight some comments from Twitter. Rajiv over on Twitter says, I'm a big fan of AEW that watches every week. Too many pay-per-views. Can't afford it every month. There's lots of good stuff. Few great stuff. Tony Khan, whenever he opens his mouth and attacks on social media, is a turnoff. Makes me like his product less. Just shut up and wrestle. That is something I wanted to ask you about, because I have seen a lot of people who have decided they don't like Tony Khan, but they've never met Tony Khan. They've just decided that they don't like what they see. And it made me wonder, and I'm not wishing for this, I'm just asking, what would you think if Tony Khan decided to take a page out of your book or Vince's book and he became an on-screen character for AEW?
He already is. I mean, guys, he already is. This again, he was like, oh, he hates Tony Khan. He's jealous. Tony wouldn't give him a job. That'll be the go-to for the less informed. But I said years ago, stay off TV, Tony. Somebody's got to love that man enough to convince him that he's hurting his own product by being on television, whether it's in the press conference, whether it's coming out and announcing matches, whatever it is. The man should not be in front of anything that has a red light on it. Just don't. Because he's not good at it. It doesn't make him a bad person. It doesn't make him there's no negative. Just because you're not good on camera doesn't really mean all that much. The only thing it means is you shouldn't do it because you're hurting your product. And I said that from a constructive perspective. Don't put somebody who doesn't enhance the perception of your product out in front of it. That's why Cody Rhodes was so great for AEW early on. That's why Chris Jericho, if you go back and look at some of the stuff coming out of AEW from day one, Chris Jericho was the front of it.
Yes.
Chris Jericho was the unofficial face of AEW.
Yes.
And I thought that makes sense. Credibility, great character, the audience loves him. That makes sense. And then all of a sudden, Cody and Jericho are shoved off the side, and all I'm hearing about is from Tony Khan. I'm going, wait, don't do that. You're not that guy. You've got two guys who are, and now you're pushing them to the side so you can be the face of the company. And Tony may not be a scripted storyline character, but he gets more TV time than about 60% of the talent he has on his roster. So, yeah, I think it's a huge mistake. He is not a good brand ambassador. You see him on television, you hear him screaming and stomping his feet, scrunching up his face and acting like a petulant 12-year-old child. That's not a good brand look. by the way, your television partners aren't probably that comfortable either. Because it's not like Vince McMahon, who was playing an evil character. He was a great performer. Eric Bischoff was playing a smarmy, power-hungry little prick. He was a pretty good character. He could act. He could perform. Vince McMahon could act and perform. Tony Khan can't do any of that other than make people kind of like fingernails on a chalkboard uncomfortable.
I just wondered if that's been pitched or presented. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying it does feel like if there's a certain amount of the audience that already has decided they quote unquote don't like him, why not lean into that? Why not double down? But I thought the same thing about Cornette. Like right early on, I thought, man, Cornette managing like FTR and AEW, knowing that he said all the things he said and that audience is already sort of preconditioned to hate him. It feels like it would have been a great opportunity. Of course, we know it didn't.
It would have been a great opportunity because Jim Cornette's an amazing performer.
Yes,
I mean, I love listening to Jim Cornette. I know he buries me all the time and all that shit. I could care less.
Yeah.
Because I think he's entertaining as
absolutely.
He'd be great. I just don't see Tony being entertaining as
Jay Beard had some comments about Cornette. He responded on X. He says, all I want to know is how in the hell did they, he's talking about FTR, talk like that about Eric without mentioning Corny? Blows my mind they go after him for the reasons they said and not a peep about him. Of course, he's talking about Cornette. Well, I think
I suspect behind the scenes that the FTR were motivated to do it. I think they were, I don't know, could be wrong. Maybe it was all personal, but I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't a prompted strategy from somebody behind the scenes. I mean, because honestly, these, I mean, you saw it. I posted it. Dax is putting over my show. I steal your shit.
Yeah,
is what he says.
Yeah,
I listen to it every week. Download it on my phone. I was doing the same thing when he wrote that email or that text post as I was last week.
Exactly.
Nothing changed on my end, dude. The only thing that's changed on your end, which begs the question, why?
Right.
Why all of a sudden do you have a 180? Before you're following my formula, stealing my shit, admitting it in public, I haven't changed a thing, but now all of a sudden you've got a problem. And I always go to, why?
Chris Tilliard over on Twitter says a very short comment. Eric's ongoing loyalty to Ted Turner is absolutely wonderful to see. Another comment in support from Jet 71111. WCW was in a different league than AEW. It is what it is. The facts are there to prove it. Eric is the only one to go head to head with Vince and not just beat him, but whip the WWF. Nobody else has even beaten him. At one point, WCW was the top promotion in the world. And that last sentence, I feel like, gets lost on a lot of people, Eric. At one point, WCW was the very top promotion in the world. We've not yet been able to say that about AEW.
Nor will you ever.
We did get some negative takes about last
bring on the
episode.
negative stuff. I know all the good stuff. I appreciate hearing about it. Bring on that bad stuff.
This is from, well, I feel bad even saying the name of the poster. CM Punk choking his coworkers. Silly name. But he wanted me to say it, so I did. My belief is Eric has now found something that has increased his viewership and social media engagement by predominantly bashing AEW and Tony Khan. Eric showing his year-over-year increases cemented it. I think it's cheap, biased, and disingenuous, but hey, controversy creates cash. Am I right?
Well, you're partially right, dude. Controversy does create cash. That's a proven formula.
Yep.
Read the book, look around you, look at politics, look at movies, look at sports, look at anything that you want to look at and try to convince me, at least, that controversy and the cash that it creates isn't at the core of it. Just fucking is what it is, dude. But with regard to me posting some of my social media increase over that particular week, again, I was responding to a question. I was asked, What's all this chatter doing to your social media following? Something to that effect. And I posted it.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm not bragging about it.
And
I'm proud of it. It was interesting. I was kind of surprised. I've never had like 6 million, views in a day or 10 million or whatever it was.
It was 10 million impressions.
But it doesn't make me a better person. It just is what it is. And it was in response to a question. That's all. So I know from your perspective, whatever your name, see him choking out his cohorts or whatever.
Yeah.
Fuck it was. Again, it's your question. Disingenuous is an interesting word. Another one that's used a lot by like Dave Meltzer and Tony Khan is bad faith.
Yes.
Literally and bad faith. These are the two most overused words or terms in all of social media. And it's usually by people who are operating in bad faith, to be honest. I was just responding. I'm not embarrassed by it. I'm not overly proud of it. It just is what it is. Any more than I'd be proud of the fact that it's 47 degrees right now here in Cody, Wyoming. It's got nothing to do with me. Yeah, the posts do and the action does, but it doesn't mean anything. I can't take it to the bank and put it in my checking account. I can't eat it. I can't wear it. Can't drive it. It's just a fucking silly number. But it is a silly number that is in response to a question. So get over yourself. Disingenuous shit.
Oh, wow. There we go.
I just had to throw that in for fun.
A little stank on there too. I like it.
Oh, come on. I'm just having fun. All of this isn't fun. It's just fun.
We had something new happen this week. We had a couple of folks ask their question on video. They filmed a selfie to ask you a question here, Eric.
Oh, goody. This be fun.
So let's take a look at Dean K88, who had a question for you, Eric.
Hey guys, I think it's unfortunate what's happened specifically between Eric and Tony lately. I remember the Fight for the Fallen preview in 2020 and everything Tony said about Eric, about being an inspiration and a role model and laying the ground for an alternative to Vince. I think it's unfortunate perhaps Tony's lost sight of that. I hope it can be resolved because I've got so much respect for the both of them.
Yeah, how about that? Somebody who wishes for happier days with you and Tony.
There's something about people with a British accent. It adds such a level of sophistication to their points. It's like, how do you argue with that?
Right.
Like, I feel bad. Like, I agree. It's unfortunate. It is unfortunate, but it is what it is. But I will also say, I think John Alba asked me this on Strictly Business a couple weeks ago. Has it gotten so bad between you and Tony that like it's beyond repair? No, absolutely not. And that's the part of it that I don't get is how people feel like I am so like this is so personal to me.
Right.
Number one, it's fun. Number two, it's relevant because we're talking about the wrestling business, and guess what? That's what we do on this show, Mucker Feathers. We talk about wrestling. And there's a lot to talk about. I have a strong opinion, and it comes off, and people think, oh my gosh, he hates Tony Khan. I don't hate Tony. If he was driving through Cody and hit me on my DM and said, hey, I'm at Cody, I'd invite him over to the house to have a drink or cook him a steak or something. No hate. So I don't know. I agree. It's unfortunate. I honestly think Tony was over his head. I think he thought it was going to be a lot easier than it is. That's not unusual. And I think he lost sight of a number of things along the way. And I was there to point it out. We are where we are. But there's no hate here. Hey, Tony, anytime you're at Cody, just hit me in the DM. You don't even have to call me. You got my number, but yeah, whatever. Just let me know you're in Cody and I'll cook you a steak. It's all good, brother.
What else is all good is our brand new affiliate partnership with Fanatics and the WWE shop. It's an easy way to support your favorite podcasts. You can shop official WWE gear and apparel by using our special URL, shopwrestlingmerch.com. That's shopwrestlingmerch.com. Or if you're watching along with us on YouTube, hit that QR code that's up on the screen now, or check out the description below for today's episode, and we'll have the link there. But you can finally shop with confidence for your favorite superstar tees, hoodies, caps, belts, and everything else from the WWE shop by using our special link, shopwrestlingmerch.com. To be clear, it costs nothing extra, but it does support the show. So if you're digging what we're doing and looking to pick up some swag, and you just know they're going to have some great deals this weekend in time for the Royal Rumble, be sure to hit up shopwrestlingmerch.com. Eric, we got more of a statement rather than a question, but we do have another video I want to roll for you, and you guys can by all means get in on the conversation. We want you to be a part of next week's show. If you've got a comment, something you'd like to say to Eric, throw that selfie video up at 83 weeks and we'll see it. Here's a message from Holly Dizzle or Dizzle Holly. Here we go.
Fantastic episode with Eric Strikes Back on 83 weeks with Eric Bischoff. Tony needs to think things through before they come out of his mouth a lot of times, I believe. Totally on Eric's side. Comparing WCW and IEW is ridiculous. Again, fantastic episode and all the best for you guys.
We appreciate the support there. You know, I do think that a lot of people are going to inherently just make the WCW comparison because of the names, because of the color schemes, because of the channels, because they're trying to challenge Vince. But that's probably where it ends. I mean, in the end, you know, Tony Khan owns AEW, whereas a television network, you know, Turner owned WCW. So not really the same comparison, but it has been, you know, a safe harbor for talent who wanted a change of pace. They wanted to do something differently. And that's what I wanted to ask you about, Eric, because you had so much top talent on the WCW side of things that it did feel like there was, for lack of a better word, a glass ceiling. And guys like Chris Benoit and guys like Chris Jericho and Eddie Guerrero, they would go on to have greater success and become world champions in a new place, but they needed a change of scenery to do it. Or at least most people think that. But we've seen legends even. I mean, Daniel Bryan, fresh off of a WrestleMania main event, jumped to AEW. And maybe that was for the schedule. Maybe it was for the money, but I would believe a guy like Daniel Bryan, it was for the love of the game. He wanted to go paint outside the lines, if that makes sense. And I think Edge did the exact same thing. In his interview, Adam Copeland said that he walked away from WWE because he felt like he had accomplished everything. What do you think? I mean, once upon a time, we saw guys, you know, like Chris Jericho and like Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero leaving WCW to go to the WWF, but we saw other top talent like Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Man, they left the WWF to come to WCW. What do you expect? I know there's been a handful. CM Punk, Cody Rhodes,
Jade.
Yes, Jade. And now the rumor and innuendo is perhaps Andrade is next on the list. What do you think is the reason we're seeing these talent go back and forth? It can't just be about money. It can't just be about schedule. The love of the game has to factor in, right?
Goes back to that passion we talked about. These are performers. And I think human nature is to think the grass is always greener somewhere else.
Yes.
Until you get there and you realize it's not. And in fact, it's not even grass. It's kind of muddy, messy. And you realize you made a mistake and you go back. You know, when Scott Hall and Kevin Nash came over, they didn't come over because the grass was greener in terms of the size of the company and their ability to wrestle in front of a big crowd. In fact, WCW was struggling. We were doing okay. We had this show called Nitro, but we weren't like selling out arenas or anything like that. There was no giant merchandising checks people were bragging about. There were no big pay-per-view payoffs that people were bragging about. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash specifically, I should say, came not because of the money. People say that, but it's not really true. They were making close to the same amount of money that I paid them in WWE. They just weren't sure they were going to get it, or they weren't sure it was going to be consistent. and they wanted to be on the road less. Kevin had a newborn son, wanted to settle down, wanted to make his family a priority. Scott Hall was tired of the schedule. They were worn down, and they saw an opportunity to make as much or maybe more money with a lesser schedule. So there was a reason or motivation that had nothing to do with the grass is greener. It was all about lifestyle. Maybe similar to what Daniel Bryan, perhaps that was his motivation. But if you look at some of that younger talent, like Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Perry Saturn included in that group, they left for a different motivation. They didn't leave for an easier schedule. They didn't leave to necessarily make more money because they didn't know what they were going to get when they got there, for the most part, other than maybe a downside guarantees, which probably weren't as much money as they were making in WCW. I don't know that. I'm guessing. Could be wrong. Chris will clarify. He'll correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. But it just depends on the motivation. And I think some of the, Jay Cargill, so young, so much potential. She made a career decision. Much like I suggested Okada do. Where's my long-term future? Is it in this company that's maybe viable, maybe not? Or is it over here where this company is definitely viable and I'm at an age and I have interest in pursuing entertainment in a world where I can actually grow? That was a career decision. Everybody's different. Everybody makes their choices for different reasons. It's too hard to kind of say, I think they're all leaving because I think they're all individual reasons. But I think at the core of it, for the people that are going back to WWE, like Cody, like Jade, like Punk, they've seen both sides and they prefer WWE. Now they've been there.
Well, we know that we prefer when we get actually the opportunity to get out and see you guys. And I'm excited to announce that Starrcast Down Under is happening April 11th through April 14th. Here we go, Ballarat, Victoria, Australia. It's our first ever international Starrcast. Bret Hart is going to be there, and he's going to be on stage. How about this for a stage show? Hitman, an evening with Bret Hart. I'll be there with him, and we're going to be talking a lot about his wrestling career and maybe some things we've talked about on this very show. We're also going to be talking about and doing a watch along of his 30th anniversary of WrestleMania 10, his fabulous match with Owen Hart. It's one of his favorite matches of his career. We'll talk about that. We'll do some Q&A. You'll have your opportunity to meet the Hitman and all of your favorites, including Bret Hart's Australian Stampede. That's right. There's not one, but two shows. We've got Bret Hart's Australian Stampede, a super card of wrestlers from all around the world, and Mickie James is going to have HER, which is an all-women show. Going to call it Her. So Bret Hart, Mickie James, and a lot of other talent, including some of our favorites, Shelton Benjamin and Chris Masters, a whole lot more. Come see your favorites. Come do the Q&As. Come see the stage shows. Watch the wrestling matches. Starrcast.com has all of your information. That's STARRCAST.com. April 11th through the 14th, 1 week after WrestleMania. We're coming your way, Australia. Starrcast.com has it all for sale right now. Listen, we have talked a little bit about everything today. We've had some video, we've had lots of feedback, and we are continuing to solicit feedback. We want to know what you guys want us to talk about. Of course, our friend JR always says in wrestling, it comes down to cash and creative. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about here on this show. Guys like Edge and Daniel Bryan have probably made mountains of cash in their WWE career, but maybe they wanted to have a little more control over their creative. So they took a run, and the creative is what everybody is going to be talking about this weekend at Royal Rumble and the fallout from that and how they set up Elimination Chamber. I think this might be one of the most anticipated Royal Rumbles in WWE history, Eric, because so much could change.
I agree. I'm really looking forward to it. You won't hear me say throughout the year that I'm looking forward to a pay-per-view too often beyond WrestleMania, just because it is what it is. But I think I'm actually more interested in Rumble right now than I am in WrestleMania. Maybe because it's, next week and I'm going to be down there in Florida with you and all of our friends and family members over at Ad Free Shows. A lot of them are going to be there, top guys, top gals. So it's just, it's gonna be, I'm gonna get my head shaved again once a fucking again. I'm gonna get my this is the last time, folks. Look, seeing me get my head shaved is not something that people haven't seen more than once, more than 3, more than 4 times before. It's happened a lot. The only thing that makes this difference is I'm going to pay an homage to Road Warrior Hawk. I'm going to get a Hawk style mohawk. That's different. Yeah, I'm going to do that. But more than anything, I'm really, really, really looking forward to the watch along with everybody. It's going to be a fun party. My son Garrett's going to be there. I'm going to try to get Wayjay, my grandson, to show up.
Wow.
Maybe do a run in. Can't wait. We got the Hulk Hogan trivia contest going on, whatever it is, Friday night. That's going to be fun. By the way, Hulk Hogan's not going to be there, so don't come because of that. But we're doing it at Hogan's Hangout, I think, right?
Yeah, we're actually going to hook it up at Hogan's Hangout on Thursday, but we've got the full schedule revealed. Maybe that's Friday afternoon, whatever it is. We got the full
Friday
schedule.
at 1:00.
Well, don't tell everybody who's not on ad-free shows where to go. By God.
Oh, well, no. It's next Friday.
Yeah,
next Friday.
Sometime in space in the future. We're going to have a lot of fun. And we are thrilled that you guys are going to be a part of what we're doing. The best place to join, man. It's where all the fun is happening. Adfreeshows.com. We've really built a little community, and so many of our folks love to get together, and we make that happen on more than one occasion. We're going to have 2 or 3 of these Top Guy weekends, and we get really, really thoughtful and insightful questions like this one that came in today during our live chat. It's from our pal Josh, who has a great question about the rankings. The rankings are back with AEW. He says, Tony Khan has announced the rankings are back. What are your thoughts? I get the win-lose record, but when it's a made-up system, it loses the impact for me personally. Now, let's sort of reset what we're talking about here. When AEW was first created, they announced that there were going to be rankings. And as a kid growing up, I loved going and getting the aftermags and flipping to the back and seeing who was in the top 10. And then they used to have little segments on WCW TV where they would run through who the number 1 contenders for the world champion was. It felt like a college football feel. That's the way I remember it making me feel as a kid. I loved it. I do think it is interesting that we're going to keep up with records and wins and losses matter. And all of that was part of the AEW pitch, but it hasn't been a focal point. And maybe people felt like creatively they were boxed in because they were trying to be beholden to the rankings. But Tony Khan says it's coming back. What do you think of that, Eric?
First of all, Tony, if you're listening, and clearly you are, or you have one of your surrogates listening, there's a guy in Nashville. I think he still lives in Nashville. His name is Matt Conway. Call Matt Conway. If Kevin Sullivan, producer, not the booker, is still answering phone calls from you, call Kevin, get his number. Call Vince Russo and get his number. You can't call him either. Whatever. Find somebody that knows how to get a hold of Matt Conway and get him integrated into your attempt to make sense and story out of your ranking systems. Matt was great at it. And when I say that, it's because of oh my gosh, what was the October pay-per-view?
Halloween Havoc. Bound for Glory.
Bound for Glory. We created the Bound for Glory series, which was I think it was a 3-month tournament or 3 months, basically a tournament, but it was based on points and wins. It can be very effective. It can also see you painting yourself into a corner that you'll never get out of. That's probably why it didn't work out the first time, because you've got to really do a great job of merging creative and math, because those two things generally don't go together. Usually good creative is kind of void of good math. Good math isn't very creative, but it can be done. It's a big risk, because if it's not going well, everybody will, if there's a flaw in your system, your audience is going to see it and they're going to let you know. And they're going to lose faith so fast. So I like the idea of doing it. I think it's one of the things that I was excited about back in 2019 when I heard that this was going to be one of the things, this was going to be the unique selling proposition for those of you who have spent, I don't know, 45 minutes in a marketing 101 class in junior college. That was the one thing that, to me, made AEW potentially feel different than WWE. Go again with the controversy equation, Sarsa formula. But they abandoned it pretty quickly. One of the dots that created the pattern that I began to see early on. Bill, you essentially you make a promise to your audience when you launch a brand, your branding statement, your mission statement, call it whatever the fuck you want. We are going to be different because we're doing this. And then you get everybody to rally behind you, and then you don't do this. You do the same thing they're doing. It's a big dent. Big dent at the side of that brand new shiny AEW car. Big dent. Kick the door in yourself. But let's see. It can be done, but it's really fucking hard. Really hard. And I'm concerned that since there's been a severe lack of creative horsepower in AEW, inconsistent, all over the map, non-existent more often than not, in terms of real story, I should say compelling story, meaning story that actually matters. The void comes to creative that I've seen out of AEW for the last 2 years doesn't suggest to me that there's a lot of hope that they're going to figure out that formula. If they do, it will take somebody like a Matt Conway working with somebody that really understands creative. Could happen. Never know. I'll hope for the best.
Bobby has a great question about rankings, and it's in regards to the WWE. Where are you on the idea that the U.S. title holder should be next in line for the heavyweight title? I have not seen that as much these days. See you in Tampa. I talked about how, back in the day, I used to flip to the back of those after mags, or even on WCW TV, they would list the top 10. Well, the number one contender for the world title was always the U.S. champion. We don't talk about that very often in WWE land, but if they really do go with LA Knight, be a hell of a time to breathe some life into that story, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's true, right? I mean, one of the things I liked about that kind of inherent structure that even the audience kind of was aware of and bought into that structure, is it was just that. It was structure. It was the basic framework for storytelling. And it involves stakes. Because if I win the U.S. Heavyweight Championship, I have an opportunity to move on to the greatest title. But before I can do that, I have to do this. There's the beginning of a story. Part of it. And they have gotten away from it, as did I in WCW. And I think, I'll just speak for myself. I don't know what's going on in WWE, but for me, that was a lot easier when you only had 4 pay-per-views a year, right? That was a lot easier when all you were doing was booking your house shows with 4 pay-per-views a year and 1 weekly primetime show. Hell, we weren't even in primetime. We were 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Pacific. It just became more difficult. The more pay-per-views you have, you've got to create more stories, you've got more stakes, you start compromising your creative, or you're compromising your structure in order to accommodate a different creative pressure. So it'll be nice if they go back to it. It would be absolutely a perfect fit, as you pointed out just now, for LA Knight. Sense would aid in his ascension. Let's hope they do it.
Let's see what happens. I know I'm looking forward to it. We'll do one last question about today's topic. And of course, we were trying to talk about how crowded it is at the top in WWE. Josh has another question about that. With wrestlers keeping their careers going longer and longer, is this helping or hindering the young talent from thriving? And what's funny to me about this, Eric, is, as you know, I was dumped a treasure trove of inside information from the good old days. And we are going to be sharing some of that on our YouTube channel in the coming months. But one of the things I got my hands on, and I couldn't believe it, was the deposition from Bill Eadie. And he's talking about how he was transitioning into a spot to become a backstage agent. And he was in this deposition saying that Vince always took care of the older wrestlers that way. And he listed a bunch of folks, guys like Lanza and Patterson and former top talent inside the ring who now worked in a backstage capacity. We would call them an agent these days, or a producer maybe. But the attorney said, "How old are you?" And Bill Eadie, at the time of the deposition, so this is a year or two later, was 45 years old. The idea being that his wrestling career, Lord, it's in the rearview mirror. He's 45 years old. Now we know, shit, man, half the guys who are in the main event of these pay-per-views are in their 40s or their 50s. Or if you're like the Stinger, he's having his last match in a couple of weeks in his 60s. By the way, that show, last I checked, completely sold out. Kudos to AEW. But do you think that keeping talent in these top positions longer has hindered the growth? Because whenever that first became common to talk about, boy, they always pointed at you. They talked about how when Rick found out the WWF was going for a youth movement and they were going to make Bret Hart, he went back to Atlanta. When it seemed like Hogan's days in the WWF were done, he went to Atlanta. Allegedly, he told Macho Man that his best value to the company wouldn't be in the ring, but behind the desk. They were going with youth like Shawn Michaels. He went down to Atlanta. Now it feels like whether you're in WWE or you're in AEW, guys like Chris Jericho and Sting and Edge and Christian and others, we're skewing a little older. What do you think about that? And the narrative that perhaps that is one of the reasons that it's so crowded at the top right now?
Wholeheartedly disagree. I mean, look, I think if I was a young talent, or if I was a young talent, or I was managing a young talent, and I don't mean managing on camera in a wrestling position. I mean, managing career-wise or being an agent for. I think what's changed today is the timeline. LA Knight, give you another example. There's a perfect example. I think what's required now is managing the expectation of young talent breaking in. If you look at some of the talent right now in NXT that's ready to go, they're developing slowly, but the more slowly they develop, experience they get, the more likely it is they're going to be actually successful when they get to the dance. But you have to manage those expectations. It's not going to happen in your first year or two or three. Maybe if you're in AEW and things are more fast-paced there because it's a new company and different creative approach, sure, maybe then you could go from zero to hero in 60 days. But it won't last. You'll flame out pretty quickly. Whereas I think in WWE, I mean, look at AJ Styles. I just got done saying 3 hours ago almost that, in my opinion, AJ Styles could be the best performer of his career thus far. He's 46. If you stay healthy, as AJ has, always had some injuries, but I mean overall healthy, lifestyle health. You stay focused, you stay disciplined. You can easily have a career in this industry, barring serious injuries, into your 40s and 50s. So when you're in your 20s, you got to go in knowing that. You're not going to, you're in private pilot school. You're learning how to take off and land in a Cessna 152 with an instructor at your side. You are not going to be flying a Boeing 767 as captain for at least 15 years because you got to build up the hours and the experience. Same is true in wrestling. I don't think it's why it's so crowded at the top, inferring that there's or suggesting that there's a lack of young talent ready to go. There's young talent ready to go. But here's the reality, folks. For those of you mucker-futhers that have never produced a wrestling show in your freaking life, including Dave Meltzer, the value of your talent is the equity that is built into that talent over a period of time in front of a very critical audience and demanding audience that requires credibility. And the only way you get credibility in the wrestling audience's mind is to be there and do it for a long time at a high level. And it just fucking takes time. It just does. How long did it take Stone Cold Steve Austin before he went from Steve Williams and Stunning Steve and whatever the hell he was, the ringmaster? How long was that period of time between his very first match, him deciding he was going to go to a wrestling school, getting good enough to have a first match in front of people, and then becoming Stone Cold Steve Austin? I don't know the answer. I'm going to guess it was 10 or 12, 15 years.
8 years from the time he started till he won the strap.
All right, 8 years.
Your point's close, though. I mean, you're on the money.
It takes time.
Yeah.
And if you're the type of person who's going, wow, I learned how to drop kick and look at all the fancy shit I can do, and I can do cartwheels and all, and blah, 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 fucking blah, and you can't cut a promo, you don't know how to sell, you can't control a crowd, you can't do any of that stuff other than be a gymnastic exhibitionist, then, and you think that's going to make you a star next year? Find another career. It takes time. It just takes, anything that's good takes time.
About 8 years and 6 months.
This show has taken 3 hours, and I think it's one of the best shows we've ever done.
Well, listen, we want to hear from you guys. Hit us up. It's easy to find us on Twitter. He is at eBischoff. I am at Hey, it's Conrad. Over on Instagram, he is at the real Eric Bischoff. I am at Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. You can interact with the show and post video questions or any sort of questions you've got. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. It's always at 83 weeks. But the easiest, cheapest, best way to support the show, man, hit that subscribe button and be a part of our community page over on our YouTube. It's 83 weeks on youtube.com. A lot of the comments that we pulled out today were from that communities page. Join us up at 83 weeks on youtube.com. By the way, if your business targets men that are 25 to 54 years old, there's no better place to advertise than right here with us. You hear some of the same sponsors week in, week out, year after year. Why is that? Because it really works. And with our super targeted audience, there's very little waste. Go right now to advertisewitheric.com to find out more about how to advertise here on 83 weeks. Be sure to pick up Eric's book over on Amazon. We've got tons of new fun swag for you at boxofgimmicks.com, or you can check out 83weeksmerch.com. We've got the brand new Cody is the Guy t-shirt. I'm an Eric Bischoff guy. Even I'm an Eric Bischoff gal. We got I'm back and so much more, including the old logo off the Ninja Star throwing shirt. Something for everybody. That's a deep cut for a wrestling fan. 83 weeks.
That's the beginning of everything. That shirt right there, the logo on that shirt, Ninja Star Wars, came off the Ninja Star Wars game. And literally that game, our efforts to market that game led me to a meeting with Vern Gagne. And that meeting, as a result of that shirt or that logo on that shirt, changed the wrestling industry forever. No, that's not hyperbole. It's a fact. No brag, just fact.
Check it out. 83weeksmerch.com. Eric, we went over 3 hours today. Thank you for all the time. And I got to tell you, I'm looking forward. My hand, I just find myself just gripping. I'm getting ready for those trimmers. I'm getting ready to shave you.
I will never bet you again. I will never, ever, 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 ever make a bet with you again. This is bullshit. As your dad, Larry, would say, it's bullshit.
It is bullshit, but accept it. It's a fact. Eric is coming back looking like Lex Luthor next week, right here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff.